call this meeting to order. How are you?
Okay. Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Donchak.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Here.
Mayor Ham.
Present.
First item on the agenda is presentation of certificate of recognition from the Government Finance Officers Association to Brian Brower and Jake Ron for budget preparation.
Gentlemen?
Why are we doing this now? Shouldn't we wait until after we see what it is? Maybe we're going to, take these back. I mean, yeah.
Eric can hook him up before we start, so.
Aren't we a little premature here? What's up?
So, this is for the year back. Yeah, there you go, yeah. Whatever makes sense, right? Yeah, so, can we be serious for a minute, please? Gosh, we're recognizing 2 employees here this afternoon for their fantastic work. They've been recognized nationally, and you guys aren't taking it seriously.
I completely apologize, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Gentlemen? I appreciate it, Bob. Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah. Are you done yet? Because we got a feeling to get Apparently I'm not.
You know what's funny? He's got his sand holes.
Okay, fantastic. Any other comments from the Peanut Gallery? No? Okay. This is congratulations and a certificate of recognition for budget preparation to Brian Brower, Information Services Analyst, and I gotta get Jake's title. Jacob Ron, Financial Services Officer, for their excellent work in preparing our budget this year and every year prior to this. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your service and congratulations. You have another plaque to add to your offices, and I'm sure you're very excited about it. So, would you guys like to say a speech? Okay, we look forward to what you have to say tonight.
Just pay attention to my presentation later on.
Okay. Next item is report from the Assistant City Manager concerning the fiscal year 2015, second quarter report, and mid-year budget adjustments.
Thank you. So I'm going to have Judy Vincent, our Finance Manager, go over the presentation with our second quarter and our mid-year adjustment. I think it's important that we start off kind of reporting how we have done the last second quarter as we leeway into our financial forecast as part of our LTFP. So it's a great segue. So with that, Judy.
Thank you, Eric. So as Eric mentioned, we're going to look at the second quarter as where we are now before we get into the forecast in terms of where we're going. So also, in addition to the second quarter report, we're going to present to you some mid-year adjustments and ask for your approval of those adjustments at this time. So we're going to focus on the general fund revenues at this time. If you look, our general fund revenues are at $22.2 million at December 31st, and that represents about 43% of our budget. And this is pretty much right on track with where we normally are this time of year. We're actually maybe a little bit ahead at 43%, and that's just a timing issue of when receipts are coming in. But we're about on track, but you can see that the general fund revenue has grown each year over the last 3 years, so from 49.7 in 2013 up to 52.1 in the current year. So that's good news. We're seeing slow and steady growth in our revenue sources. I'm just going to focus on a couple of the main revenue items. Property tax, here's a 3-year view of where that's been at this point in the year. So at December 31, again, you could see that slow, steady growth. The great news for this year, though, is that when we prepared our budget, our consultants had given us an estimate, and that's what we used. And then the assessor's office actually did more of the Proposition 8 reassessments. And if you remember Proposition 8, when we had the recession, people can ask to have their homes assessed at a lower rate. And then when the economy improves and housing prices go up, those can get reassessed back to the original value or higher. So that had occurred this year. A lot of those reassessments happened, and so we're seeing a $410,000 mid-year adjustment that we're requesting to show the growth in that revenue source this year.
Judy, is this a representation of commercial and residential or just residential?
This is all of our property tax,
okay.
Yes. And actually what we've heard too is that we expect those reassessments to occur, more of them to occur next year, and then that should pretty much take care of everything that's out there. So we'll see that another hit, maybe not quite that much, but another hit next year as well, or an add next year. We're going to look at sales tax, and again, remember this is through December 31st. So you'll see for the last couple of years at this time of year, We've been pretty steady. This year, we've gone up about $200,000. But sales tax is an interesting item because at this point, at December 31, we really have only collected about 25% of the total sales tax. So there's a lag in receipts. So it's very difficult at this time to say whether we're going to do better this year or worse this year. We anticipate that we're going to pretty much come in where we budgeted, but what we see through the first half of the year is good news. Service charges. These, the large growth we're seeing here, you can see we've been pretty steady, and then this year quite a bit more. That is mainly coming from development, new development, so the Marblehead project. There's a lot of building permits and plan check fees that we're receiving. Kind of the bad news is those are one-time items, so we can't really look at that in the future, that's going to help our operating position, but it's good for this year, and that one-time revenue is good to have. There are also expenses on that side as well, but that's good news as well. So this is looking at the general fund expenditures at this point in the year. We're at about 42% of our budget, so 26.3 or about 0.4 million. Last year, we were at 41% of our budget at this time of the year, so pretty steady, pretty consistent. I'm not going to talk about any of these particular items right now for the fact that we have our forecast later. I do want to mention we'll have some mid-year adjustments, and I'll get to that one more slide. Keep doing the wrong thing. So again, this is what I just mentioned. We're at 42%, just a timing difference, but pretty steady in terms of what we've done in the last 3 years. Little bit of growth in our expenditures. So the mid-year adjustments we're requesting, I mentioned a couple of these already, but the largest, the property taxes at $410,000. Our TOT, there is a good story there. I kind of skipped over it in the slide, but the $150,000, we've seen really remarkable growth in our vacation rental program. We've actually tripled the revenue in that program since over the last 3 years. So from 2011 till this year, we went from about 85,000 to about 250. Tom Rendina heads up that program and has been working every year to increase those amounts. So that's a really good story there. And this year, we're asking for another 60,000 in a mid-year adjustment because that revenue is coming in. We have received about 78% of our original budget.
Judy, before you move on,
Yes.
The TOT, do we charge that for only short-term occupancy, or is it long-term as well?
It's
And what is
short-term, under 30 days.
Under 30 days?
Yes. So if it's 30 days or more, they do not have to pay the TOT.
That's regulated by state, I would imagine.
I believe so.
Okay.
Is that correct, Tom? Regulated by state, the 30 days? No? Oh, it's
That's by us.
Okay. So I misspoke.
Okay.
The planning and plan check fees, we talked about that with the extra development going on this year, as well as the construction inspection fees. We're seeing more revenue in the parking meters. One negative revenue amount, the ambulance service charges. We had added the seasonal ambulance this year, and we had estimated what we might get in revenue, and that revenue is not coming in quite as much as we thought. In addition, some of the Medicare payments have been reduced this year. The government reduced Medicare payments, so that brought our revenue down as well. So we're reducing our projection for that by about $100,000.
What were we expecting? We were expecting to offset that 100,000, or we knew it was going to be a loss later? We were just taking that for what it was.
Well, we didn't know when we originally budgeted. We had budgeted about $958,000 in total ambulance revenue. That would include the seasonal. So this will bring it down to about $858,000. And then on the expenditure side, you'll see the next slide, we have an adjustment there as well. So let me get to this. So the total general fund revenue changes about $1.4 million additional. And on the expenditure side, there's some miscellaneous adjustments here, but the ambulance cost is the one I want to point out where that's increasing. And again, it's a combination of our seasonal, what we had originally estimated, they came in a little bit higher, and then as well as our regular ambulance costs, and those are based on actual costs. So, you know, we make an estimate at the beginning of the year, but depending on overtime and salary increases and things like that, we pay the actual costs. Bob, you have a question?
I got one question.
Yes.
I'd like to stay focused on that ambulance for just a second.
All right.
We had a pretty good idea. We had some pretty good estimates that was going to be almost a break-even issue. And then to come in, I think it was 500,000 or something like that. Then to come in 20% below that seems to me to be a pretty serious miscalculation of that. How'd that come about, Judy? I mean,
So let me back up. So the actual seasonal ambulance, the addition for that was going to be about 150,000 in revenue, and was going to be about 150,000 in expenditures. That was our original estimate.
Okay.
When the budget was put together and OCFA gave us our actual, or our projected expenses, they were able to plan for having not fully paid, I don't know how you would say that, but it's more of a part-time, there you go, part-time that doesn't have the benefits that a fully paid ambulance driver would have. So they were able to actually come in at about 50,000 is what our expenses were projected to be at that time, rather than 150. So we really were going to save on the expenditures, but still having the revenue that we thought. In actuality, those total costs came in at about 65,000 as opposed to 50. So the costs were a little bit higher than the 50, but way lower than we originally had thought. So in order to break even, all we need to come up with is 65 in revenue, and that would put us at a break-even point. Now, how much revenue of all of this is exactly attributed to seasonal and attributed to the other, I have not been able to break that out yet, because, as I said, the Medicare payments reducing have an impact, as well as the seasonal ambulance and how many pickups they have. So I don't know if that's answering your question.
Well, the question I'm leading to is when we talk about seasonal ambulance service very soon here, are we going to have better numbers, better estimates, better guesses on how, I hate to miss numbers by that much. We're going to have a better.
We'll have a year of activity. But remember, ambulance revenue it's dependent on who's getting hurt. So, or who needs the ambulance. So it could be just a matter of the fact that there's less calls for an ambulance in one year compared to another. It may not have anything to do with our estimates, it's just the use of the ambulance.
I get that, but will we be able to get those numbers and those, the reasons behind them before we talk about doing another seasonal ambulance?
Yes, I'll put together a better report for you to give you that information.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Baker, one of the things that attributed to this increase in expenditures, one of the things that OCFA had indicated that they were going to do their best to do is I'm going to use seasonal hourly employees as the model that were non-benefited. However, there did seem to be some full-time benefited use within the staffing with seasonal ambulance, which attributed to a higher cost. And so we're going to have to drill down on that when we propose another seasonal ambulance service, because there are certain restrictions with regards to how many work days they can work and that type of thing, and so they're delicately trying to deal with that. But I think we're going to obviously now, with a year under our belt, look at a higher staffing cost for seasonal ambulance to be better prepared from a budget and revenue standpoint, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Before we move on, what is the overall net loss on this seasonal ambulance then? Because the 90,000 and the 100,000 makes it seem like it's 190,000, but what is it actually?
See, I can only tell you the program in total.
Okay.
As I was explaining to Councilmember Baker, I haven't been able to separate out which revenue belongs to which.
So okay, then that brings up a better point. Is there a net loss with the ambulance program, or is
No,
there?
it's a net gain.
There we go.
So the net gain is approximately $200,000.
Clarify a little bit for you, Bob. Net gain of $200,000, just in case anybody was.
So the whole program. You're welcome. Okay, so our mid-year adjustments for expenditures are $267,860. So where that leaves us in terms of operating position for the year, with these adjustments, we'd be at a 0.4 million operating position. It's about 367,000, I believe, is the actual number. And our fund balance, our unassigned fund balance, which is the money that's available for projects and special one-time costs, before the adjustments, we were projecting 2.3 million, and now we're projecting 3.4 million. And this would be at the end of the fiscal year. This is what we're projecting would be our unassigned fund balance. We do have some other funds with adjustments. Just want to mention a couple of these. There's grant revenues in the gas tax fund, and those are related to a Measure M grant for arterial pavement management. And there's also additional developer impact fees, and this is mostly related to project activity in excess of what we had originally budgeted. In the other funds, expenditure increases, the accrued leave payments, we've had a couple of long-term employees retired, so we want to shore up that fund to get it back to a level that after the adjustments have been made. There's some additional legal costs for various items. Mitigation maintenance related to land subsidy at about $92,000. So the other fund's about $301,000. And all of these adjustments, you received a thing that looks like this, that had the mid-year report in it, and at the very back, it lists out all of the adjustments. I'm sure you've seen them, but there's more information there if you would like to see it. So at this time, the next item is a long-term financial plan workshop, but I'm happy to answer any other questions about the quarterly report or the mid-year adjustments.
I just want to say thank you, and I also want to say it's sure easier to do when the recession is sort of, in our rearview mirror. But keep the conservative management principles and keep us on the tracks.
Absolutely, yes.
Because it's been a long time since we've had situations where all these numbers are looking so healthy.
Good.
So, nice job.
Thanks. So we do need to take action on the mid-year adjustments. though.
Judy, before we go, I'd like to, I just want to talk about one page in this book for just a minute or two.
Yes.
And that's page 18, where we talk about performance measures in public works.
Yes.
Down here where we talk about clean ocean and budget, I'm dying to know what the number of local outreach impressions per year, how we calculate that, what makes up $7.7 million of individuals receiving education. I knew Mr. Vonnegut would have the answer. I just knew
there was
that.
a Mr. Cameron or Mr. Vonnegut who would come here and talk about this.
Good evening, Mayor Ham, council members. Tom Vonnegut, Assistant City Engineer. So that number is outreach impressions, and so how we tally that is anytime we have an impressional event, like if we take an ad out in the San Clemente Times, for example, and we know that their average weekly circulation is 30,000 issues, we figure that there are 30,000 eyeballs that are looking at that ad, and we do that for other media. We can have estimates for the online ad. So every time someone views a piece of outreach, we call it an impression, and so that's just gauging how much outreach we're doing.
Well, that's my point, exactly, because if the circulation is 30,000, how many people, is there any way to quantify how many people actually look at your ad? Some advertising guy would know the answer to that.
Now, actually, for certain print, generally not, unless what we're starting to do now that we worked with the Coastal Advisory Committee is when we do certain ads, we ask for, we encourage people to, go online to our website, take some action, put in a code, and based on that code that we ask for, we can start tracking because it's a unique code to that particular piece of advertising. So we know, oh, they put in SC01, so that was an ad we put in on a certain edition of the San Clemente Times. Or if they clicked through on an online ad, we can see how much throughput we're getting on that particular ad. So we can start actually tracking with a little bit more fine detail on where are we reaching them, which ads are being effective. So that is something that we are starting to do. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it does answer my question, because if you're taking credit for 30,000 impressions because their circulation is 30,000, I would hazard a guess that it's probably doesn't reach really 30,000 people. And you knew
Right.
that and,
yeah, we know
and
that.
all that.
We're doing
and
kind
I
of
get
the
it.
best practice, but we're trying to make that more meaningful by these more targeted type of tracking.
I vote yes on making those numbers more meaningful.
Great.
That's the only point I'm trying to make there, Tom.
We
So
agree
thank
with
you.
you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If
And
not,
you
I
need a
think,
decision.
yeah, we have an action.
I move that we approve the the financial year 2015 second quarter report, and I move that we approve and authorize the mid-year adjustments listed in attachment A of the administrative report dated March 4th, 2015, that is on file with the city clerk.
Second.
It's a motion by Brown, second by Doncheck. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you, Judy. Your hair looks very nice today, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Joanne, I should know the answer to this. We don't televise this meeting? Because I had a handful of people telling me how they were going to be watching it, and they'd heard it had been switched from 4 to 5 o'clock. Have we never
sorry.
broadcast this?
We've never broadcast it. We are taping it. It will be on our website tomorrow. And I believe, and I'm looking at Brian, I believe tomorrow. So it'll be available tomorrow. So no, we've never put
Okay,
this
I
on.
just couldn't remember. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of start off and do a little introduction to our long-term financial plan. Really quick, I do want to give a little pay respects to the photos that we have up here from our employee, Will Boothagen. So it's a little homage to him. So with that, I agree. Introduction. I'm Eric Sun, the Assistant City Manager. Couple of things with regards to the 2015 long-term financial plan. This is our 23rd LTFP. I did make note to the council members when we distributed electronically that we've created a long-term financial plan website, and we have put up all 23 years of our LTFPs for resources for the public. So it's kind of an interesting thing to go back and look at the first LTFP that was typed and where we've come in terms of the issues that we're dealing with. So I encourage you to look at that website and check out all the resources. This is a nationally recognized as a model of financial planning tool. Many agencies envy us with the fact that we've done an LTFP consecutively for so long. Many agencies wish to do an LTFP but lack the resources to do that. One thing that's very important, our long-term financial plan helps reinforce our city's AAA bond rating, which we find very important and valuable for our fiscal well-being. The LTFP financial plan, a couple of bullet points. It's a plan that identifies fiscal issues, challenges, and opportunities. It also provides an option to update fiscal policies and set goals. We examine fiscal trends. We look at our reserve policies. We also focus on long-term initiatives. And tonight in the LTFP, you're going to see a number of long-term initiatives that we're looking out 5 years, such as an IT strategic plan, as well as the Centennial General Plan strategic implementation plans. So it's a tool that we really want to focus on looking at the long-term issues. And at the end, obviously, it provides us with a financial plan. In this LTFP, we'll have the trends that we'll go over, the forecast. We'll look at the reserve analysis. We'll touch on fiscal policies. And as always, we'll talk about the capital project analysis. And then the two issue papers that we have within this LTFP are our Information Technology Strategic Plan, and as I mentioned, the Centennial General Plan Strategic Implementation Plan. What does the long-term financial plan tell us? Well, some of the key points are we see continued moderate economic expansion, whether it's sales tax or property taxes. We also are looking at a projected operating position in the negative in all the years of the forecast for the next 5 years out. We're projecting a 1.9 million unassigned fund balance at the end of fiscal year 2016. That projection excludes any capitals. And so remember, as we get close, as we go through the budget process, we'll have an unassigned fund balance that the council looks at to select CIP projects to allocate with that. If we weren't to allocate anything in this coming budget process, we would end up with a $1.9 million unassigned fund balance in the next year's budget. It's important. It'll tell a story later tonight that's important because we're having our unassigned fund balance is small and our needs are great. So we'll get to that a little bit later. Also, our general fund reserves continue to be funded, which is something that we're very proud of in terms of maintaining that AAA bond rating. Where are we going? So we're projecting operating deficits over the next 5 years. We're seeing significant increases with police and fire services and insurance costs. We're also having the realization of the fiscal impact of a number of deferred facility and park maintenance projects. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to present a positive operating budget as we've always done. So we will balance it, but there's a question of to what cost will it take for us to balance it. We're going to work on mitigating those increases and seek revenue to offset those increases with both public safety, fire, and insurance to the best of our abilities. We're endeavoring on a facility prioritization and a facility maintenance reserve. When Ken gets to his CIP paper, he'll talk a little bit about Lucidity and CMMS as that tool to help with our priority projects. But one thing that we'll be talking about throughout this year and into the next fiscal year is really focusing more on our facility maintenance reserve. It's not funded to the needs that we have. And again, when we get into the further papers, you'll see that we're going to want to focus on that in the future to make sure that we adequately are funded for the projects that need to get repaired. And then more importantly, we're going to be monitoring Marblehead revenue at every turn. So we're working very closely with Craig Realty. We're getting ready to take the endeavor of the CFD with the bond with Marblehead. All of those revenues will be monitored and tracked, and if we need to make adjustments, we'll be coming back to council. But Councilmember Donchek's point, we will remain conservative in our projections so that we don't get ahead of ourselves with our forecasting. Trend analysis. I'm going to go briefly over the trend analysis. As you know, we use 20 different indicators for establishing or monitoring our financial trends. These are recommended trends, or recommended, I'll say, points that the GFOA points out to us. So one of the biggest things that we'll see is we see a number of trends that have gone from a favorable warning to a favorable position. And so this historical chart shows you those trends. The three that I'll focus on very quickly are the elastic revenues have gone from a favorable caution. Oh, let me back up. So the elastic revenues, those have gone from a favorable caution to a favorable. Permits and business license revenues have gone from a favorable caution and are now showing as a favorable. And community development charges are going from a favorable caution to a favorable.
Now, does that include one-time or is that trend analysis?
That's trend analysis. That includes both one-time and ongoing.
Okay.
I believe there's different, there's typically computations excluding in the graphs, excluding one-time revenues and also including one-time revenues. So,
okay.
But it would basically be considering both of those.
Okay.
And just really quick to point out, elastic revenues are revenues that are highly responsive to changes in the economy and the inflation, sales tax, transient occupancy tax, etc. And again, we've seen a change in this for the better, so we're putting it in a favorable spot. Permits and business license revenues can be attributed to both the business license climate and a little bit of Marblehead with all the permits that we're pulling with that. That also attributes to the community development charges as well. Okay, fringe benefits. They remain at a warning rating for the third consecutive year. Primarily, this is due to the increase, excluding Social Security, as a percentage of the general fund salaries and wages from 42.5% in fiscal year 13 to 44.6% in 2014. This increase was mainly due to pension costs from the prior year. However, prior year going backwards, when we look forwards, we should see some reductions in pension costs partially attributed to our MOUs, where we're giving a certain amount to the employees, but then we're also having the employees give us some take back or giving some cost offsets by them. So in the future years, we should see that a little bit better. However, it's always important to know that one of the main triggers to maintain this is compensation. And when me and James had an opportunity to go to the League of Cities in San Francisco, that was one important point that they wanted to drill to all cities, is maintain a watchful eye on your compensations. While we're totally a city that looks at providing fair market wages, we need to make sure that certain wages don't get out of hand. If wages get out of hand, then we have a higher PERS or pension cost associated to that. So as you'll see with the class comp study that'll be coming in the near future to the council, we're very mindful of wages to make sure that they're within the market median. However, we also want to look at wages that may be too high and adjust those as needed. So food for thought.
Eric, can you hone down the near future into more concrete detail in terms of a time frame?
With regards to the MOUs currently?
No, with the class and comp study.
I suspect that we'll be landing that class comp study with the council in April.
April this year.
April of this year.
Okay.
And what we would be looking at doing is any changes would be implemented as part of the budget fiscal year 16. So council will be looking at that. However, we'd be incorporating those changes into the budget of 2016.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Judy. We've done a really good job, I think, with the LTFP and really focusing on some key strategic initiatives that we need to look at long-term planning. Again, we're kind of going back to the core values of the LTFP. As we get further into this the papers, the CIP is going to be a really good segue to paint a picture of we have all these projects, not all the money to do them. how do we prioritize them? And we need to start being very cautious in taking on new projects when we still have to maintain existing infrastructure. And staff is doing a great job of balancing the resources to maintain those, but we have to be careful, because if I build a new park, hypothetically, what about all the parks that I have to still maintain that need, improvements or enhancements to the deterioration of the infrastructure? So that's going to be an important message that we'll be conveying throughout the day. Thank you very much.
Eric, while we're waiting, I'm looking at staff. Who was here when we did the dots? Was that 2 years ago at the LTFP with Paul? Was it?
I was not here.
It was 2 years ago, right?
Not last year, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah. Okay. Are we going to do the dots anytime
No red
soon?
dots.
Oh, okay.
Last year, at the conclusion of the LTFP, we did a reconfirming of our strategic priorities. So we basically reconfirmed the strategic priorities that had been red dotted the previous year, such as the Clean Ocean Fund, and there was some underground utilities was another strategic priority. So that was, no, it was at the back end of the LTFP at the fireside.
To add more, it's actually good, except until you
Can you buy a dot? Is that the, want to buy an extra dot? Okay, so I'm back here, more numbers, sorry. So we're going to look at the financial forecast. In your LTFP book, there is an extensive document on the forecast. We'll be highlighting some of the points in this presentation, but obviously not everything. I just want to point out the forecast is a 5-year look. It's the general fund only, so we're looking out 5 years for the general fund, and keeping in mind that the further out you get, the less accurate the forecast will be. So we have maybe better numbers in the first year. By the 5th year, we're kind of guessing because we don't know what's going to happen over 5 years, but we make an attempt. The forecast will have no new programs, as in the past years, no new programs, no new positions are being recommended or mentioned in the forecast. And we're also, as in past years, we're being conservative. So we look at things based on history and based on the projections we get from consultants and that type of thing, but we try and be very conservative in this so that we're not over-projecting what we're going to get in the future. So that being said, so overall, what does the forecast tell us? Eric already touched on some of these things, but I'm just going to mention it again, the projected negative operating position in the 5 years. We see that our revenues are continuing to increase at a steady but moderate pace, so that's good news. The increase is good. However, our contracted expenditures are exceeding that growth, so they're growing at a little bit faster clip than what our revenues are growing at. Other expenditure increases, I said other increases, but other expenditure increases are mainly inflationary in the forecast. We just assume that they're increasing by inflation unless we know something different. So that being said, let's focus on revenue for a minute. So the total revenue is going to increase 3.2% on average over the 5-year forecast period, so 3.2% each year. I'm going to talk a little bit about property tax here. I mentioned a little bit in the prior presentation, but 50% of our operating revenue is property tax. So as we see that grow, that's really good news for us because that's half of our operating revenue. And conversely, when it decreases, really not good for us. I'm projecting a 5.6% increase in year 1. As you all know, the housing market has been doing very well over the last several years. What happens in property tax, though, is there's a lag. So when sales start to go up and prices start to go up, that's great for us, but we usually don't see that revenue for a couple of years because it has to wait for the assessed valuation to happen, which usually occurs in January, and then those revenues are not received until December and April of the following year. So the market's been doing well, so we're going to start seeing that growth as we get into now these current years. The other thing I'd already mentioned about the Prop 8 recapture, and so some more of that is going to happen in fiscal 16, hence the 5.6% increase. After that, 3.3% is the average increase for the 5-year period. Okay, I'm going to talk about sales tax for a little bit. Sales tax is our next largest item. It's 16% of our operating revenue. So between these two, that's about 2/3 of our operating revenues are just these two revenue sources. The big increase there, that 13.25 in year 1, is really a combination of things. It's a small increase for our general property tax, about 1.4%. So, we've not seen robust growth, and some of that's due to store closures. We've had a gas station close, and we've had like vacancies at the Kmart Plaza. So some of those closures put a depression on the revenues that are coming in. In addition, fuel prices have dropped considerably, and so they're expected to stay rather low over the next year. And it's good news in some ways on the expenditure side, but on the revenue side, we receive sales tax for that. So as those drop, our sales tax drops. So our general sales tax not going up quite as much, but what is the good news is Marblehead retail. Right now, September 2015 is the expected date of opening, so we're looking at about 9 months of revenue. I've done a lot of work trying to estimate this amount, but we don't have history. So we did a couple things. We got a number from the developer, but those are usually a little bit high, so we brought that down a little bit. We also looked at other retail outlets similar to this in other cities. Carlsbad has one. There's some others in Palma Valley, some other ones out there. So we looked at those and what they bring in on a square footage basis. And then we also have a list of at least half the stores that are going to be opening at Marblehead, and we worked with our consultants to give us some information on what they project revenues would be for those half of stores. We don't know the other half yet, so we kind of had to extrapolate a number. So with all of that, we came up with a number of about 1.4 million overall for an annual revenue, and then we took part of that, ramped it up over the 4 quarters. So that's where we got the 9 months of revenue. We are not assuming in the 5-year forecast any additional revenue for future phases. So we do know that there may be a phase 2. We're not sure when that'll be, so we're not assuming anything for that.
Judy, I'm going to interrupt you here.
Yes.
Discretionary income is kind of a zero-sum game. When you did your forecasting, did you assume any cannibalization or lost sales from like a Target or a Walmart or, you know what I'm asking?
I do know what you're asking.
Yeah.
We did not, because our consultants are saying that most of the revenue for here will probably be revenue that has been leaked. They call it leakage when you don't have enough stores to support your current population. So in other words, our residents have to go out of town to shop for clothing, for instance. There's not many clothing stores here, so they go out of town to shop for clothing. So correcting that leakage, even though there may be cannibalism, as you say, from other stores, there's also a correction of the leakage that's out of our city. So that should
It's going to be interesting
mitigate
to
that.
watch because, for example, in the hospitality restaurant industry, a case can be made that somebody might eat at this project rather than eating at the Shops at Talega restaurant out there.
And actually, one of the things we're working on is trying to have our sales tax consultants provide us information by area so that we can actually see that. We can look at, well, what happened to the downtown area as Marblehead increased? Did that go down? Did it go up? What's happening there.
That's
So
an
we're working
excellent
on that.
analysis because there's another school of thought that the rising tide lifts all ships and that, all of our business hubs could benefit. But okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes.
And, it's interesting because you said that cannibalization and will more shopping options, or at least restaurant options, have people who right now don't go out because maybe the restaurants don't fit their needs or what they think is important, but all of a sudden you have more options. Does that increase spending on the part of the local electorate? It's an unknown, but one of my questions does that assume full lease up of phase 1, or does that assume, say, a 50% lease up on phase 1 and then incremental growth on a quarter-over-quarter basis as they add new tenants?
More the second one, not exactly 50%, but by the end of the year, assuming full lease up. At first quarter, nothing. Second quarter, I think I had about 60%, and then going up from there.
So full lease up would occur on this calendar, in July of 2016?
Yes. For projection purposes only. I'm not sure where they're at with it.
Before we move on from this,
Yes.
the next phase is for Marblehead. Is Tom Onnigan somewhere? I have a question for him.
He's on his way.
Perfect.
I can see it.
Hey, Tom. Where are we at in terms of future phases with the hotel project, and what is the drop dead date for when that project is up for a second look?
There is no drop dead date because they've met their, the project is being constructed now, so.
For the hotel phase?
Well, the hotel isn't, it's not, there isn't, as far as I know, an actual hard requirement to do it. It's in a future phase. That's really up to Craig Realty to determine when. It was part of the site plan. So that's how the project was approved. You know, they might change it. I believe that they still are planning to do it. I don't know what phase that's in. We think there's going to be 2 to 3 to possibly 4 smaller phases after this initial one, much smaller square footage. We'd have to check with the developer.
So the hotel phase is guaranteed in perpetuity. 2110, they can decide to build a hotel there if they want.
You know, that question is going to require more research to figure out how the phasing works with the original development agreement and so forth, and we can get back to the council on that so I don't misspeak. But
Okay.
there will be some future phases. As far as we know at this point, there is still a plan to do kind of a boutique hotel, somewhere between 120, 150 rooms, I think, that size.
Okay. Thanks.
And we can get back to the city manager with detail on that.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
And I just kind of peeked ahead. I think this is where I should ask this question. Since we're talking about Marblehead, in addition to the sales tax revenue, there's going to be in lieu fees that are collected for affordable housing from the Taylor Morrison piece of
The developer
project.
fees?
Yeah,
Yes.
the developer piece. And I have been emailing a little bit with the city manager on this, and I guess that money actually will be in the coffers in 2017. What I would like to do, get a definitive response from legal as to whether what that money can be used for. If it's just affordable housing, or if it could be, for example, if the city wanted to buy some property to zone for emergency shelter or transitional housing. But, you know, basically to satisfy some of our housing requirements. So
Okay.
do you understand what the question is?
I do.
Yeah.
I don't understand the question. Can you repeat it?
Okay, the way the current policy works is, I think it's for every 6 units you build, you have to build one affordable one. I think that's is that the right ratio? Okay, and if you don't want to build it, you can give the city money instead.
Okay.
And then the city takes on that responsibility. And so the Sarah Housing Project was funded in part with in lieu fees from development that's happened around town. So it looks like the Taylor Morrison project is going to generate, what, James, about 800,000? Yeah, roughly $800,000 in money to the city that we would get when all the permits are pulled, so whatever. So my question is, historically, we've used it for our affordable housing RENA requirements. Is that money, if it was the council's will, could we use it to purchase property for emergency shelter zoning or other uses? I want to know what the uses for the money are. I want to know what the broadest
Gotcha.
definition is. Was that a clear answer?
Yeah.
And then the confusing part is there's affordable housing, there's low-income housing, extremely low-income housing, transitional housing, seasonal emergency shelter, and then emergency. There's 5 categories. I just want to know if when this money comes in the next 5 years, how
Okay.
it can be used. And
Thanks for the
from a legal
clarification.
point of view.
Yes.
Okay, because
Understood.
that could be important.
Yes. Okay, just finally with sales tax, two more things I want to point out. One is our sales tax projections do not include anything for the Kmart, Estrella Shopping Center. I don't know what the term we're using for it nowadays. There's some uncertainty involving that, so I have not included any revenue projections for that. The other thing I want to mention with sales tax, you may hear things about the triple flip being eliminated. And, well, I don't want to get into a whole thing about the triple flip. We talked about it last time. I just want to let you know what that means for us is really just a timing issue with the collection of our sales tax receipts. So where I showed you earlier that we only receive about 25% by this time of the year, when the triple flip ends next fiscal year, we'll start to get that money more quickly than we do now. The other thing is when the program first started, there was sort of a 3-month lag. And so if the state pays us when they say they will in August of next year, we'd actually in next fiscal year have a 6% one-time bump. And that amounts to about $500,000. I have not included that bump in here because we're not exactly sure when we'll get it. But I just wanted to let you know that as you hear that out there, if you're going, well, what does that mean for us? That's what it means for us. Okay.
I have some question about the variability of the Estrella Shopping Center. It wasn't included in any of our projections, and that is because we still lack key, deadlines? Why was that not included or considered?
The project is still being processed through the entitlement process with the planning staff. And there's been some talk from the developer that if he isn't able to secure a freeway sign for the Sports Authority, then Sports Authority will walk from the project, and that'll probably have a domino effect on the other leases for the retail.
If you can make this a short one, it seemed to me that the projections for that facility were 300,000. Is that the number that's been thrown around?
275
And
around,
the
yeah.
projected revenues for the outlet facility in phase 1 is 1.4.
Yes.
It seems that the ratio doesn't seem to jive with me. I mean, the phase 1 of the outlet mall seems to be very large, whereas the
You know, I thought that as well, and then I went and looked at the size of the proposed stores for the Estrella Shopping Center, and there's very large, you know, the TJ Maxx and the, I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying the stores, so never mind. Anyway, the stores are,
Proposed.
were large, yes, it's a big center and they're
Okay.
larger stores, so.
okay,
So it was 275, so not quite 300.
great, thanks.
Okay. So I'm going to move on and talk about expenditures in the forecast. So they're projected to increase 3.7 on average over the forecast period. So we talked about revenues going up about an average of 3.2%, but expenditures at 3.7%. So you can see where the disconnect is there. I'm going to talk about a couple of the large expenditure items, salaries and benefits. As we talked earlier, a 3-year MOU agreement is in place, and so that will take us out through fiscal year 17, and that is included in the forecast. Employee wages are to increase based on the MOU, but there's also a take-back from the pension costs that employees pay, so they'll pay a higher amount of their pension. I want to mention that the impacts of class comp are not included in the forecast. We haven't landed that yet, so none of those impacts will be included here.
Before you move on from this,
Yes.
what is the total cost or impact to the general fund for our new contract with employees after we realize the savings from the
I actually had that here.
pension costs?
You mean annually or over the 3-year period?
Annually.
So
Yeah.
annually, the first year, which is the current year we're in, the net was about 440,000.
What does that equal out percentage-wise, increase in our contractual costs or our salary costs?
So the contract, it's 2.775 is the increase in the salaries, and then a take-back of almost 1% in the pension.
So a net increase of 1.75 the first year? And then what was the second year?
The second year is going to be a net increase, actually, it's 1.85 in the first year.
1.85,
All
okay.
3 years, 1.85 net,
Times, okay. Thank you.
yes. And the dollars are 400 to 450 per year. Okay. So as part of salary and benefits, I want to talk a little bit about pension costs. I don't know if I want to talk about them, but I will talk about them. Favorite subject, pension. So we have kind of a complicated little pension system here at the city because we have several different plans, if you will. So I just want to mention a couple things. We talked about employees are going to pay a higher share of their pension in the go-forward year. So that's going to help us decrease our pension costs because the city would pay less as the employees pay more. So that's a positive thing in terms of the city's expenditures. For miscellaneous employees, you remember that we transitioned all our active employees to CalPERS in June of 2014, and that resulted in a 2-year fixed rate from CalPERS. So rather than, you know, the transition took about 9 months, and they set the rate sort of at the beginning of that period. So lots of things happened during that period. So this 2 years, we have a fixed rate, but we're not sure where it's going to go after that. So there's, you know, some concern that that's going to rise. The retirees and inactive employees remain in the Great West Plan. So we still need to maintain payments to that plan to pay the liability for those people who have already retired or who've left the city and will retire from somewhere else, but we still have an obligation to pay retirement for them. So that's kind of the miscellaneous employees. That's everyone except our lifeguards and our prior safety employees. So we have 2 safety plans. One is for our lifeguards, and we have about 5 or 6 active lifeguards. We paid off a side fund balance of $225,000 in May. That's from last year's LTFP. That was an action council had authorized us to do, so we paid that off. So we continue to pay normal costs and ongoing payments towards the liability. The safety plan is for prior police and fire employees who we've now contracted that out, but we have an obligation for retirement for them. That had a side fund balance that was paid off in November 10 of $4.8 million. But again, we continue to make ongoing payments to the unfunded liability for this. So all that being said, I'm going to show you this fun chart that I put together. Looks busy, but what I was attempting to do here is to show you all of our plans, what our unfunded liability is, where we're at percentage-wise, and kind of what is our plan, right? You hear a lot out there, people are concerned about these, so I think it's important that you sort of get an understanding of our overall picture. The hard part with this, if you look at the as-of date, I'd like to present you as of all of them on the same date and give you here's where we're at. Unfortunately, we have actuarial reports for all of these, and they come in at different times. So I don't want to make assumptions on what the updated numbers are. I'm just using what the last report we had told us. So as you see on the left, the type of liability, those are the different plans. I just mentioned the Great West plan with our retirees and inactives, and then the CalPERS plan, the lifeguard plan, and the safety plan. There's also retiree medical, often referred to as OPEB costs. And we talked last year about setting up an irrevocable trust for that, and so we're still working on that, and we'll be doing that. So what this says too is there's the unfunded liabilities listed. So it's about 30 million in unfunded liabilities, which is a big number. Ouch, it's a big number. But the good news is we're about 73% funded for those. So that's the unfunded part, but the funded is 73% of what our total liability is. So, you know, we'd like it to be higher, but it's not that bad. I mean, when you're in the 70s, that's considered pretty much where a lot of people are and where they'd like to be. We'd like to maybe move up to 80%. That would be great, but that may take some time. A couple things to point out. The Great West and CalPERS numbers there, again, through this transition when we broke things up, it's a mixed bag. So I have an old actuarial from August of 2013 for CalPERS, and I won't get a new one until October of this year, of 15. So for all the CalPERS plans, the next actuarial I get will be this year, and it will reflect the June 30th, 14 numbers. So my point is I'll be giving you an update to this, but this is where we're at right now. And the retiree medical, you see that 0% funded. That's because we have not set up a trust yet. When we do set up that trust, we plan to put some funds in there, as council had authorized us to do, and that'll probably get that to about a 50 to 55% funded place. So we're making progress on those. So I just wanted to mention this. I don't know if there's any questions on it, but Laura, yes.
I've got two questions. One is, if we as a council decided we wanted it to be 80% funded, you know, if over 3 years that was our goal, is that a prudent financial strategy for a city? And then so that's my first question. And my second question is that I got the impression from a meeting at CJPIA that there'd been a change in GASB in terms of how unfunded liabilities are to be reflected, and that when they're large, it can affect the credit rating and the standing of a city because the intention of the change is to make it more transparent what the financial exposure a city has is. So those are my two questions. One is it a good idea for us to target 80% or pick a number? And secondly, can you speak to the new GASB change?
Okay, so let's start with the first one. So whether it's a good idea or not, I think there's different opinions on that. Personally, and this is just my opinion, I think it depends on what other needs you have for that money. As we talked about earlier, we have a lot of infrastructure needs that we need to maintain and do some repairs on. So if we take all of our funds and pay this down, well, that's not a bad idea. I mean, you know, you're putting money somewhere, you're paying off a liability, that's always a good thing. But if it ties up all of your funds and you can't do some of the other infrastructure items that you need to have done, you know, I wouldn't think that would be a good idea, but that's just where I'm coming from with it.
Because, you know, historically, we've been proud of being a debt-free city, but that's what this is, pretty much, right?
Well, and one of the interesting things is, even if you paid off that unfunded liability for any of those, next year you may have a new one, because it depends on how the market performs,
right,
it depends on who's retiring, what they're taking, what they're making, your payroll, all of those things go together. So I think it's probably a combination of things. We work on paying these down, and that's what you've been doing by paying off the side fund balance, by setting up this trust. You're making those steps, but they're maybe slow, steady steps rather than just plunking, you know, all of our $3.4 million unassigned fund balance to this and then having nothing else to use.
Can you give us a little bit more detail on what your timeline means on this chart?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. On the first two, the 20 years, that's really important because a lot of people out there are paying off their unfunded liabilities over 30 years. When we had our Great West plan, the city chose a 20-year amortization period. So we're better off because we're paying we'll be paying it off sooner than other people would. So the 20 years on both Great West and when we went to CalPERS, we said we don't want to use your 30-year model. We want to stay with what we have rather than extend the liability out. It's like your mortgage, right? I don't want to go from 15 to 30. I want to stay at my 15. On the others, where it says 22 to 30 or 24 to 30, there's different pieces of the liability. So the big part of the liability was restated, and the first one, like the lifeguard plan, was restated about 8 years ago. So it was a 30-year fixed. Now we're at 22 years left of paying that one off. But each year, when there's a new layer that comes up, that layer starts over at 30 years. So for the lifeguard plan, there's actually 3 layers of liability we're paying off, and one's 22 years left, one's like 29, and one's 30. Does that kind of make sense? So I'm just trying to tell you how long it is that we're paying off these liabilities.
So in theory, in 30 years, we should be 100% funded.
Except for the new liabilities.
Yeah. Current liabilities will be
If people start living longer, you know, it changes everything. So your next question was regarding GASB 68. So GASB 68 is a reporting requirement. So we need to report in our financial statements, we need to report the whole liability. All this unfunded liability will need to be reported in the financial statements. Before this, you didn't report that. You just reported if you did not make your total contribution for that year. So if your contribution was $1 million, you only paid $900, then your liability was only $100,000. Now they're saying, no, we're going to have to reflect the whole liability. For the general fund, it's going to go into our consolidated statement. It doesn't have to be entered for the governmental funds. It goes into a consolidated statement. So you will see it. We'll see it on the balance sheet in our CAFR. What that impact will be for bond ratings, I can't say. I'd have to talk to the bond rating people, but everyone is going to be going through this. So we could do some research and see what their
wake-up call for.
Catastrophic for some cities.
Yeah, don't you think?
Absolutely.
So is the analogy, I've got my credit card and maybe I've got like $15,000 of debt on it, but as long as I pay my $103 minimum balance, nobody needs to know that I'm carrying this huge debt.
right,
But now that would have to be out there.
right,
But whereas before, as long as I paid the $103 or whatever it was,
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah. But notice my ratio, so I'm clueless. Yeah. 50,000. Yeah.
So I was just going to ask if Jake, did you have anything to add about GASB 68?
Just going to Lori's comment, yes, it becomes more of I'll call it a net worth calculation as opposed to a cash flow calculation. It's primarily there to deal with the reporting and not necessarily the funding side. You can pay your credit bill over 36 months or whatever. This one, you're just showing the liability. And again, there's 2 types of basis of accounting for our financial statements. One is more geared towards cost recovery, and it's called proprietary, for the proprietary funds, and it's called the accrual basis of accounting, which is what most businesses use. In those circumstances, the liability will need to be recorded in the fund, so we'll have to determine what allocation would be applicable to those funds. The other basis of accounting would be for the general fund or other governmental funds, and it's not recorded in the fund, it's recorded on a rolled up, it's called a government-wide financial statement that converts the governmental side to the full accrual basis of accounting. So it's going to be a little convoluted, but hopefully the rating agencies should be able to work through that and figure out what the funding status of all the different agencies are out there. Just from me reading some things, nobody is really funded, or very, very few people are funded at the 100% level. So I believe CalPERS were kind of in line with what the funding levels are for all California cities, or most of the California cities. So that's just something that will be taken in context as part of the transition to GASB 68. So.
Great answers. Thank you. You
You're
made it clear.
Okay. So we're still on expenditure. So here's two other items I want to talk about: police contract increases. So we received a first estimate of 9.48% for the coming year. So that's what I included in my projection, since we knew that number. That is made up of about 8.5% increase in salaries and wages, a 12% increase in workers' comp costs, and then about $500,000 for new field services training bureau. Future years average about 2.58%. The future years, what's interesting is their projections, and we got these projections from OCSD. They don't include, they include flat wage and benefit growth, assuming that any wage increases would be offset by take-backs for pension, for instance. Well, all three of the bargaining units have expired or are in negotiation right now, and we kind of got told that story last year, but then we get a 9.48% increase. So we're a little concerned that maybe what they've projected for the last 3 years may be too low for what actually happens based on our history. So I just want to put that in there. In addition, the hospital closure, or the potential hospital closure, we've not included any additional impacts for that. We don't know what's going to happen with that or what that impact might be for police costs, but it has been mentioned, so I just want to put that out there.
Judy, before you leave that slide, well, I got a question for the city manager. What are we doing to respond to this very large increase in the sheriff's contract costs?
I've been meeting with other city managers in South County that have contracts with the Sheriff's Department. We've been talking about it. We're trying to schedule a meeting right now with the sheriff herself to talk about it. We've set up a group of finance directors and assistant city managers to go over the numbers, and we've hired a consultant to look at it. We're contemplating hiring Matrix to look at the contract costs and go over some of the numbers there. And we're also talking to other cities, Mission Viejo and San Juan Capistrano in particular, about forming a task force, a group, to start looking into forming our own police department.
I'm glad we're doing all those things, James. Thank you, because I think it's important to take a look at all those issues, because the direction of this graph is getting out of hand. Again, we had the same discussion last year, and the numbers weren't this large, and they were alarming last year, and now they're
I think last year the increase
really alarming.
Was 5.85% is what they projected to the council, and they told the council that it was going to be flat to a decrease this year for the current contract. When I started here in the fall, they told me the contract price would probably go up 5%. 2 months later, it changed to 7%, and then the final number was 9.5%, and they're saying 2.5% for next year. So I really don't know what I can believe for the contract costs.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing the outcome of this. Thanks.
Okay, our other large contract for services is with the OCFA for our fire services contract. We have a 30-year agreement with OCFA, well, not 30, 20-year agreement left. And the maximum that contract can go up each year is 4.5%. So that's what we include in the forecast, the maximum increase. Last year, we did receive the maximum increase of 4.5%. This is assuming the same service level as the current year. So just to mention the ambulance program, we talked about that a little bit already, so I don't want to go over that so much again, but I just want to mention we have one full-time, we have one seasonal. The seasonal runs from May through October, 12 hours a day. We haven't assumed any additions or changes to that program, although we've talked about them, so we'll see where that goes with the budget, but for right now, we have not. And there's no additional impact, again, for the potential hospital closure. So where that will land, we may have budget impact from that once that lands. Okay, so let's look at the numbers. As you can see here, operating revenues and operating expenditures over the 5-year period, and then the projected deficit showing in each year. And in case you don't get the deficit, we're going to show you another slide to show you the deficit projected each year. So, you know, they're large numbers, but they're not, we can work on those. I think they're doable, that we can make some changes. James has already mentioned some of those, so when we present the budget to you in a few months, you will receive a balanced operating budget without these deficits.
I would be interested to see, because you can take a projected, and you can take a best case, and you can take a worst case. A worst case would obviously be 10% year-over-year increases on public safety units, flat to little revenue from new projects coming online, and then also the potential closure of the hospital and increased ambulance costs. And so that could change from 0.7 to 3 to $4 million. That's right. In a worst case scenario. Now, in a best case scenario, it would be 1 to 2% cost increases from our public safety units, as well as projected overage revenues. But if we're going to look at our operating position, I think that we should be prepared for the pat on the back scheme and the disaster scheme, and just be able to be aware that what that looks like on progression on both ways, because I'm glad we're taking this position, but we should also be aware of where the floor is, and we should also be aware of what the ceiling is in those two scenarios. And I hate to be a doom and gloom guy, but frankly, the doom and gloom stuff is what keeps me awake at night. So, if we are going to present a budget, I'd like to see a budget where we assume that everything, what we think will be, what would happen if everything fell apart, and what would happen if everything lined up the exact way we want it. And it doesn't have to belabor it, but it should just give an indicator. And also that the city, that we need to be confident that our management could handle a doom and gloom. That we could figure out a way to make that work if everything went, to hell in a handbasket, that we could find a way to address it.
Well, I like that thought, Tim, but we also, remember, we do have some reserves to take care of scenarios, doom and gloom scenarios like that. But I would like to see, I think that's an excellent idea, to have a one-page report on what could happen should all those things you're speaking about right there
including how we would access the reserves and maybe emergency meetings, how we would how would we respond in that case, and then ultimately, if things didn't happen that way, what we'd be looking at. So I mean, I don't want only the bad. I'm looking for a more balanced, nuanced picture than that. But ultimately, nobody expected 2007, right? Nobody. Well, some did, but 2007, right? 2008 when it came, and so I just want to make sure that if it does happen, that we have our what we would consider to be our fallback plan in place, that we could at least manage it, and we can make sure that the residents know that if everything went apart, that we are prepared for that contingency.
Sounds like a good idea.
That we are prepared with a contingency, not for for that disaster.
Judy, what does this gray line represent? Or is it just a computer error?
I mean, it's just an extra line.
Okay.
There's the line showing the zero,
Yeah.
where it's at 0, and then, it's just showing the trend. I don't know. It's not really showing it.
I guess
I'll
in
check
some,
that out. I'll fix it.
I guess in some sense, what I would call this is maybe we ought to at least have a pressure test exercise where we could pressure test our finances in case of a disaster like that. If some of these things are lining up the way they are, if we pressure test it, will the city survive? Can we maintain basic services, and what would that look like?
We can just cut our pay.
Although your
that'll
original
do it.
idea was a bracketing kind of idea where we'd see the upside too, which I think.
I think we need to see that, but the reason why I'm asking for the doom and gloom is I just want people to know that even if everything went wrong, we could still handle it, and that we need to feel that confidence as a city council, that if literally everything went wrong, that we are still prepared for that contingency, and we could continue to operate and eventually recover.
Absolutely.
So
Understood.
I know, and it wouldn't matter for us because we'd be fired as elected officials. But for the next group, we want them to know that we could recover.
We want to break out too what the savings would be if we cut all of our.
Yeah,
salaries to
exactly.
zero. So, how that savings would affect the overall budget.
Not much.
It could possibly balance the budget.
Yeah, we could probably, yeah. Yeah, there. Good luck. Good luck, sir.
Okay, so let's talk about the unassigned fund balance. So we've already said 3.4 million ending this year's projection. At the end of 2016, that would go down to 1.9 million based on the forecast in front of you. And remember, that's based on a $700,000 negative operating position. We obviously have to correct that before the budget comes, so that number will then increase your 2016 number once we correct that. So, and you can see how it just gets worse from there on out. And this is excluding any capital projects. It includes a $950,000 for ongoing maintenance that we include every year, but any other one-time maintenance or capital projects are not included here. So if we redo that slide and we add in those capital projects, it's really bad. I do want to point out that these are the capital projects that were in last year's budget document. So there's a projection in the CIP program. The new CIP program is being developed at this point, and actually those costs are going to go up because we're adding facility maintenance and infrastructure maintenance in those. So it's not a pretty picture. And I think our
Never
point
mind,
is-
I think we found our doom and gloom slide.
Yeah.
I think we got what we needed here. Thank you, appreciate that.
Okay. So our reserves, we talked a little bit before about what we would do doom and gloom. Well, as Bob mentioned, we do have reserves. The Vista Hermosa Park, I want to mention we had a reserve for that through 15. We project having about 181,000 left on that at the end of 15, and we would use that for the first quarter of 16 before the Marblehead retail outlet is open. So that'll help us out a little bit next year, but it's not a whole lot. So I just want to mention that that reserve will be depleted by the end of 16. Our emergency reserve is 9% of our operating expenditures, so you can see that that increases every year. And then the sustainability reserve at 10 million even throughout each year.
Before
Yes.
you leave there,
Shoot.
in my notes, I had that we were doing a GFOA reserve fund analysis last year, like last summer, last spring, or something like that.
Yes?
Did that ever happen? And if it did, is the analysis what we're seeing tonight?
The analysis is not what you're seeing tonight. I know there was some work on it. I don't know, Eric, if you want
It
to
was like a
speak to that.
$15,000 expenditure. I remember making notes. And,
Correct. We haven't paid for the study yet. We have basically finished the formatting. Originally, the plan was to work with GFOA and a Dr. Sam Savage on probability modeling. We actually have created some probability models with the help of our two in-house Excel gurus, Larry Moore and Bill Humphreys, who was dubbed our CPO, our Chief Probability Officer. So if you see Bill, he has another title as well, but he doesn't get additional pay for that. That tool is, we finished the tool, and that tool allows us to basically use it as a sliding scale to say, we specifically did the tool for the peer replacement because, you know, weather storms occur, we have historical data. So that tells us as a sliding tool, and it'll be mentioned a little bit when we get to the CIP and the municipal peer discussion. It's a tool that we have that we can use when we need to look at modeling for reserve. The one thing that we did learn through this study was, you know, you have to have money to fund the reserves. And so the model helps you tell even a more doom and gloom because with the peer, we lost the RDA funding to help subsidize the maintenance and replacement of it. And as we get further into tonight's discussion, we'll talk about some of the plans that we have for that based on BELOTA and some other unforeseen cost increases that we've been hit with, specifically insurance. So it's a tool that we have, and it's a tool that we can use when we need to use it. And so I hope that answers your question, Councilmember Donchak.
it doesn't, because, so we're not doing the independent GFOA reserve study.
No.
We're not.
We have the tool to use when we need to use
So
it.
we've created an in-house, well, because what was attractive about this was it was an outside third party that, you know, wasn't so close that, you know.
Correct. What we got basically was instructions on how we could make the Excel table. And so in-house resources had to take that modeling on, thus Bill and Larry. And so we worked with, actually Dave Riebensdorf worked with providing data for that. And so I think what the vision was originally and what we ended up with were two kind of different things.
Could you send me the RFP then that went out for this?
It didn't-
Or scope of work?
An RFP wasn't conducted for this
What was the
study.
scope of work?
I can look and get back to you on that.
Okay, because it sounded really important to the health and well-being of the city, and I just want to make sure we're not shortchanging ourselves.
Absolutely, I will.
Are you familiar with this?
I think I remember exactly what Councilmember Donchak is speaking about, and it was an important question that we asked about, are these reserves appropriate?
Exactly.
Do we have too much in there or not enough? And that was the question that we asked, and I
Yeah.
still think it's an important one, frankly.
And especially given some of the new ideas for things to reserve money for.
Correct, and what we will talk about a little bit later is with the potential sale of La Pata happening within the next year. When that sale occurs, we're going to be coming back to council with basically a new reserve model, if you will, and helping to look at specifically the facility maintenance reserve that is definitely underfunded. In terms of, are we adequately funding our reserves? We are. However, the question is, are our models in place accurately capturing the needs of the projects? And a good example is the facility maintenance reserve, and I'm getting a little bit off topic with the reserves, but for instance, facility maintenance reserves looks at historical expenditures. Well, if the city is not spending money on improving facility maintenance, then we're not funding a lot of reserve money because historical data for our formula says you don't need to. But we know we have a lot of projects that we're deferring that we haven't set aside money for. So we are going to have a new model to look at how we distribute the reserves to better fund our needs. This tool will be a tool that we can use. Is it a critical tool? After a lot of analysis by finance, we're seeing it as a useful tool, but not a critical tool, if that answers or helps answer the question. But I'll look at the scope and get back to you on those things.
Just send it to me as a memory refresher.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because your point is exactly right. It was, do we have enough? And then or too much.
Or too much.
Yeah.
We didn't, we asked that question.
Yeah. And then with tonight's conversation, it sounds like we're creating even more reserve needs or identifying more reserve needs. So.
Okay, so on that vein, I just have a couple more slides. Other fund balance issues. So Marblehead, we've talked about this already. Most of these items we've talked about. The third bullet, though, I just want to reiterate again, there are some parks and trails that are being built. Some have already transferred to the city, but as those are completed, they transfer to the city along with the cost of operating and maintaining those items. So it's good news, bad news, right? It's great to have the additional facilities, but they cost. And so that's been added to the forecast and amount to maintain those. But again, as we move on, you know, those amounts may go up because as things get older, the maintenance costs go higher.
What is the rough cost for that next year?
I think it's about $250,000 is what we put into the projection, but it may even be higher than that.
Wow.
Is what I'm hearing.
I thought it was going to be 500 to 600 at the end of the day
It might be.
for the two parks coming online too, with the trails.
Yeah. Okay. That seems high.
Well, my question isn't necessarily the commercial development, but when do we start seeing the benefit of residential sales in terms of our tax receipts? That's 300 homes. That's.
I do know the permits have been pulled, and Tom we may have Tom come back and talk about that as well. I do know the permits have been pulled. However, the actual dates of the sales and the timing of it is still to be determined. So I've not included anything for that. When they do get built, remember, there's still a lag.
Oh,
so
that's
the
just a
assessed
couple
value, so
years,
it's still
sure.
going to be a couple years, even if they were completed tomorrow.
Because that's going to be a big part of balancing the trail and parks is, you know, I know the commercial development is what we're really looking at, but ultimately,
Right.
my expectation is the homes will self-sustain, if not offset completely that expense, so.
Right. Okay, so that's, we've already covered all of these items, and then finally, some other fund balance issues. We've talked about the Belota land sale. 5.8 million in proceeds is what's estimated. We've actually already received about 800,000 in proceeds, and those lots were sold were a little bit higher than what we had originally anticipated, so that was good news. That money went into the general liability fund. Thing in the general liability fund, we've been receiving retrospective bills for retrospective payments, and those keep coming. And so when we think we pay it off, we get another one. So pretty much all of that 5.8 million is going to be needed based on our projections in the general liability fund. 3 million to pay off the retrospective, and then 2 million to shore up the reserve balance so that it meets the fiscal policy that we have in place, which is 1 year of premium. So our premiums have gone up, and therefore our reserve requirement goes up.
And just to segue back in 2014 LTFP, we had created a model with the Belota land sales, and part of that was whatever was left over, we would basically set up a municipal peer reserve. And based on these unforeseen costs that have been imposed on us, we're basically recommending to change a little bit of direction on that with paying those things off with the Belota land proceeds and then dealing with the peer reserve as a facility maintenance reserve with all of the other issues as well. And so all the more important that Bill gets out there with the sales flag and sells the properties.
And that sort of goes into the last item on here, which is the La Pata Vista Hermosa land sale. Originally, there was an estimate of 2.6 to 3.5 million. I believe we're looking right now at trying to get an updated actuarial to see what the value of that land is, but that's the estimate we have right now.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about this now, or are we talking about this later, Eric?
We can talk about it now.
Well, are we bringing it up later?
No.
No? Now's good before we eat, not after we eat? Yeah, we're going to eat like in 5 minutes. So do you want to talk about this after we eat?
Let's talk about it now.
We'll talk about it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have,
Oh, I was kind of surprised to see this on here because I thought the last time we discussed it, we kind of cooled our jets a little bit on selling property, and Tim had some ideas on different avenues to.
Yeah, this is, it was just more of a philosophical discussion about, about the city's position and policy on real estate holdings. It's always been, hey, we're not in the real estate business, but the challenge is that, love it or not, we are, and love it or not, it's been very good to us, the real estate business in terms of rental income, and frankly, it's been probably the more positive performing aspects of our portfolio, that we, bought land and bought buildings, and we don't have to pay rent, and that we aren't, liable for those costs. But this particular piece of land, I think we had looked at not only because it was going to be a funding mechanism for outstanding projects like the beach trail extension potentially, but also because there may be a need for that land to service Talega in terms of, gas station or some use on this land that would benefit the community at large. So my position doesn't change. I like holding on to the real estate we have. I don't think we ought to sell it just because we don't want to have those assets. But ultimately, this corner, especially with La Pata opening up, not only would we be able to generate, proceeds from the sale, the public benefits from having that be activated in a, gas station, especially because there's hardly any gas stations in that area. But that's just one thought of the use for it. But lastly, we could also potentially, in terms of taxes, also be able to benefit incrementally from sales taxes on, even though it would be minuscule, there could be something benefit from that.
And to give you a couple of factoids, we did just conclude an appraisal for the lot. That appraisal came in at $3.29 million for that lot. We've had a number of inquiries all across the board wanting to develop. Many of the inquiries have said that the space is bigger than just for one particular thing. And to your point, completely agree with ongoing revenue streams. Gas stations / convenience stores are one of our top sales tax producers in the city. They're in the top 5, consistently year after year. So I definitely appreciate looking at something that's going to provide ongoing revenue streams with regards to that. There is a council decision of whether, yes, do we want to sell it or do we want to lease it? Leasing it obviously would take on some property owner responsibilities and landlord things. But yeah, we look to the council for that direction.
What was that number?
3.29 million.
3.2.
And that was appraised as of.
2.5 acres.
It's about 2.29 acres.
And so in a leasing scenario, in that case, would an operator come in and build facility and we'd give them a long-term lease?
I would probably say that we would do an RFP or an RFI and leave that open-ended to see what kind of proposals we get with regards to lease and development, site development costs and so forth, because I think the city might want to take the position that we don't want to get involved in developing the site in preparation for a lease. But then there's the cons are somebody will want a relatively low lease if they have to do a lot of development on the site.
Okay.
and so probably this item should have been titled more the land disposition, whatever that might be, whether it's sale, lease, or what have you. But what we had discussed and bringing back to council is possibly using whatever funds we get from this to help shore up a financial or facility maintenance reserve, or to help not establish it, but to put some funds into it to fund it in a better way.
I don't know what the thought of the council's going forward at this point, but it just seems to me a little premature to be talking about selling this before La Pata's even open. I mean, that's going to open up the door to so many opportunities, and the value of that land's just going up. It's not going
Well,
down.
I'm glad we had this discussion right here now. I'm not sure I want to delve into it any deeper and talk about more of this stuff because, we can talk about that all night. But I'm glad we had this discussion to update us on exactly what's going on and everybody's thoughts, and something for a future meeting that we can all think about.
And many of the inquiries are already forecasting the La Pata, so many of the people that are coming forward are knowing that La Pata is in construction and not far off. So that is intensifying interest, definitely.
I think 5 years ago when the project wasn't funded, wasn't built, environmental, you would have had a lot of people saying, well, we'll do a wait and see, but the project is imminent. Rancho Mission Viejo is being built, and so it's, I think more importantly for this lot, I wouldn't want to sell anything, frankly, given the opportunity. But there just really is a lack of there's just no gas stations on that side of the 5 freeway that services that area. I've heard it time and time again, the one right by Lowe's. But it's just so heavily subscribed that, you know, folks in Talega have mentioned it, you know, without even me soliciting comments on it.
I'm reading the appraisal right now, and I'll just say from the appraiser, I'm quoting the category of highest and best use. The site zoning allows for a number of traditional retail uses. This limited investigation suggests that a service station and/or car wash would be one of the several potential uses, and one that appears to have limited competition in the area.
Okay, so showing you the forecast. So what's next is we put together the budget, and then we bring that to you, a balanced budget. So the budget workshop is scheduled for May 14th, then the budget public hearing on June 2nd, and the budget adoption on June 16th. So that concludes my forecast presentation. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Nope. Okay,
Thank you very much, Judy.
you're welcome.
Is everybody comfortable with 20 minutes?
Yes.
Yeah?
Laura's
Okay.
like,
Well,
Okay.
I do have a question about how much, just could you guys give us an idea of how much in terms of presentation time? I imagine you went through that on dry run, maybe an hour left, hour and a half left? What's the thought?
I'm going to say that the biggest items that you'll be discussing, the fiscal policies, the risk reserves will be somewhat brief. However, when we get to the capital improvement paper, as well as the IT and the SIP, I'm suspecting for those 3 alone, it'll be at least an hour discussion, depending on, you know, what,
So we're looking at probably an 8 o'clock timeline.
give or take, yeah.
And I'm going to bring up a couple of things that I think we need some real discussion and hopefully some closure on this evening. I'm going to bring up the 2 things that I think are most important for, we seem to be stumbling around in the woods over a couple of issues, and I think this council should make some decisions on. One, are we going to move out of this building into that building? Negotiate. I'll be looking to the city manager for his views on that. And number 2, I think another one that we're stumbling around on is whether or not we're going to continue down the road to a local coastal plan. What are the costs and benefits of doing that? I think I would love to have that discussion tonight and talk about those 2 issues when we come back.
Great. So 6:50. We'll. Okay. Good luck. Okay. There we go. Tim's aiming for 15.
trails?
Just the trails alone are gonna be 300K.
That's the formula. I don't think that's branch understanding. There's a loss leader. And so that's why like everybody wants to incorporate linear ranch because all it is houses.
So it's not gonna give us, yeah, it's not gonna give us
They do the income,
for all that. Wow.
That's exactly backwards from our model of how we work here, but that's
Curious how much your real estate taxes we get a full build out. Those are high-end homes. Those aren't middle of the road.
but the awareness is here,
Paying for the streets and all that,
yeah,
you know,
they use a lot of stuff.
There we go.
and fire, and police for that.
Call it the event order.
That's all of them, that's all.
Ron.
Give 'em- yeah, give them to.
We got Jake. Jake's up next.
Got one more slide and I'll let you know. And just as we as we jump into the next one on the reserve analysis, one thing I want to mention really quick is, people coming up to me and saying, in 2015, how are we going to look in 5 years? And, I think it's important that, we let them know that we don't have 2020 vision and we're doing our best. That was a joke to try to levity
Yeah.
it. And
Because it's 2015, 5 more years.
Wow. That was horrible.
that was, Jake wrote that joke.
Should we go back to dinner and let you guys work on another piece of material? So we
That award that we gave you earlier, if we could have that back, Jake, that'd be fantastic.
I tried, Jake. I so badly tried.
Obviously, it wasn't that good if he asked you to present the joke, right? That should have been your first clue. Like, ooh, yeah, he doesn't want to say it.
what you're talking about.
Yeah. Or did he just throw you under the bus, Jake? Which one is it?
Oh, no, I came up with this.
That's awesome. Eric, I got this joke for you.
Yeah.
Can you tell instead of me?
I thought it was thank you.
Clever, it's clever.
Okay.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Jake Ron, and I'm the Financial Services Officer for the City of San Clemente, and I'll be covering the reserve analysis tonight. Basically, the city does an annual review of its reserves to check compliance with fiscal policy and to propose any new fiscal policies as part of our reserve analysis. There are 7 reserve categories, and I just want to point out that we have 2 new reserve categories tonight, and those are the second and third bullets, which are the debt service reserve and the pension reserve. Both will be discussed in more detail on future slides. A list of all the reserves is on page 78 of the long-term financial plan. The sustainability and emergency reserves. Basically, we are going to maintain the previous funding levels. So it's going to be maintained at the same levels as the previous year. The sustainability reserve will be at 10%. And for the operating reserves, the emergency reserves, they'll be at 9% for the general fund and 12% for the enterprise funds, which is consistent with the previous year. Just an additional note, the sustainability and the emergency reserve in total would comprise approximately 30% of the operating expenditures of the general fund. The debt service reserve, this is a new reserve and is actually a result of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan that we received for the construction of the recycled water expansion within the city. Basically, it's part of the loan agreement that we entered into, and the reserve is going to be funded in the amount of $900,000 as a result of the completion of the project. And the wording will be on the fiscal policy side of that. So we'll get to that a little bit in the future, but the wording is basically what's on the slide right there. The pension reserve, this is actually a follow-up to the prior year long-term financial plan recommendation, which called for the creation of a $500,000 or $500,000 pension reserve. The reserve is basically being created to offset any pension rate changes as part of the CalPERS conversion. What we're visioning this is to create a temporary reserve to absorb any rate increases as part of the CalPERS conversion. Right now, as Judy pointed out earlier, we were going off an actuarial report from a much later date, and our rates with CalPERS are fixed for a period of basically some of fiscal year 2014, some of fiscal year 2015, and some of fiscal year 2016. So they will come up with new rates as part of the fiscal year 2017, and this is all discussed in the reserve analysis. But us setting aside these monies will allow for any rate changes to be absorbed for a period of hopefully 1 year, and at that point, the funds would be released into unassigned fund balance.
So Jake, on page 78, the 500,000, it says estimated reserve balances at June 30, 2015. So now, is it going to go up another 500,000?
No, this will be, we're setting aside the 500,000 in fiscal year 2015 as part of last year's recommendation.
Okay, and then the following year, would 500 more go in there, or is 500 just what you think you need for the
500
buffer?
is what we think we need for, well, it's just anticipation of any rate changes, because again, a lot can happen in, I'll call it 2.5 years with assumption changes, rate changes as part of actuarial reports. So we just want to be prepared for any significant draw on city resources at
So
that point.
it's not a building fund, we keep it, it's fully funded at 500,000? Is the
It's
policy
funded at
concept?
500,000 based on the recommendation last year. And again, what we'd like to do is, if we're going to pay off things, we want this money to go back to unassigned fund balance or be put up for any council discussion in the future. So we want to move that money back to unassigned fund balance after we have the new rates and we can kind of see what the
And
effects
through
are.
the transition.
So to assist with the transition.
Great explanation, thanks.
Jake, I got one question for you.
Yeah.
You said if we're going to pay off things. What do you mean by that?
Alluding a little bit to council's discussion earlier about the unfunded liability, maybe at some point in the future, council wants to go ahead and pay off, or not pay off, but make more progress towards the payment of unfunded liabilities, whether it be pension, OPEB, or other considerations that council might have.
Okay, thanks. Because my point is, those things that we paid off in the last couple of years were things that we paid off because the interest rates we were paying on that money was a lot more than we can get. So we had the cash, so we paid them off, and that's, part of our good fiscal stewardship there.
Yes.
But do we have any more of those laying around that we can?
A little bit, in GASB 67 and 68, which we talked a little bit about earlier. The city is actually quite complicated from, I'll call it, an accounting perspective, because there are different types of plans that are out there. We'll basically have our own plan, which is the Great West Plan. We have what they call a risk pool, and that's typically for agencies less than 100 employees. Everybody kind of goes into a risk pool and they allocate costs based on that. In addition, we'll have a plan with more than 100 employees. So we'll have like our own separate CalPERS plan, and there's different, one is our own, and then one is like an agent multiple employer, and one is a single employer. So we're actually quite complicated from an accounting perspective of those, but it makes it a little bit harder to pay off those, especially in the risk pool, or something where we might not directly receive all that direct benefit. If we were to take those funds and put it towards the unfunded liability, we'd probably want to focus on, I'll call it the legacy plan with Great West, or our own separate plan with CalPERS.
So basically, the answer is no, there aren't any easy ones laying around that we can pick off.
No.
Thank you.
All right. And then moving on to the miscellaneous general fund reserves. These encompass the Vista Hermosa Reserve, and that'll be fully utilized during fiscal year 2016. And the accrued leave reserve, we're asking for a transfer of $160,000, and that's just based on the retirements and other leave payouts that occurred during the year, and that way we can maintain compliance with fiscal policy at that point. The general insurance reserves cover basically the general liability and the workers' compensation fund. And again, these are ways that we can allocate costs to various programs, potentially smooth charges out to the various funds, and set aside amounts for the payment of current claims or anticipated future claims. The recommendations are listed on the slides, but essentially we're requesting the charging out of the 2.4 million of the costs, retain the 5.0 million proceeds, which was covered a little bit earlier. Again, the order that was in the previous LTFPs were to fund the general liability at the premium charge level, is 2.05 million. So that's a slight increase from the previous year of approximately 300,000. And then the payment of the retrospective liability, again, we got assessed another 900,000. So we were hoping to have some of those Bayota proceeds available to set aside in the pier maintenance reserve, but based on these other things which were prioritized above the pier reserve, making those payments would be, hopefully at some point we'll have a little bit left to go. Hopefully Bill really sells those properties and does a good job with that. So, all right.
He's out marketing it right now.
Well, but one thing we shouldn't forget, I mean, we're making light of this, and it is a serious,
Yes.
but previous council did this, and it turned out to be a great thing. I mean, it may cost us some money, but the slide's fixed, the people are back selling lots. It's going to be a great thing, whereas had we taken the other direction, it would still be a landslide up there. It'd still be a mess, and nobody but attorneys would be getting rich from it. So it's been a long, involved process. Mr. Cameron's done a great job on that, but I think it was absolutely the right decision. So.
And basically moving on to the capital replacement reserves, talking about fleet, we're basically going to maintain the contributions there for what I'll call the general fund reserves, which include the capital equipment, the facilities maintenance, and the park asset replacement. We're recommending transfers into those reserves, and 110,000 for the capital equipment, 50,000 for the facilities maintenance, and 50,000 for the park asset replacement. And then just moving on to the infrastructure reserves. The infrastructure reserves, although only one recommendation is listed, it includes the water, sewer, storm drain, and golf course depreciation and improvement reserves. Basically, we just listed the one recommendation where we are recommending a change. Previous asset model contributions were 2 million before, and we are recommending an increase of those contributions to 2.2 million.
Excuse me. Jake, can we go back a little bit to the park? Let's talk about the park replacement fund there. That 50,000 into the facilities maintenance reserve for parks, that doesn't seem like a lot of money considering what that park equipment costs.
Basically, what this reserve is, it was initially funded with $1.2 million from the start. In addition to the 50,000 that is being transferred in, there are charges to various programs that moves money in there also. So I believe there's $60,000 worth of charges in addition to that 50,000. So altogether, what we're allocating in the current year is 110,000. So the 50,000 is just a funding piece, and again, we're just trying to keep this going on in perpetuity.
Okay, since we do have 1.2 million in there, that's a.
And that's kind of what our goal is.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
At some point, we would like to transition to more of a funding model and preparing the city for the long-term maintenance related costs. And again, that kind of goes a little bit to the sale of the La Pata Vista Hermosa property and potentially funding the facilities maintenance reserves to a better level.
Is this category where we're gonna talk about the pier replacement replacement maintenance reserves? Is this where we're gonna talk about that, or?
Yeah. Ken will
Say that again,
more
Ken?
in the capital projects.
The capital reserves.
Okay.
All right, and just because the reserves kind of go into fiscal policy, I'm going to go ahead and cover these for Tom. Again, staff has performed its annual review of the city's fiscal policies, and no modifications were recommended for the existing policies. However, there is the policy that is being recommended, which is out of the reserve paper, and basically the new policy is going to read as what was proposed in the reserve paper. The city borrowed the $14.3 million related to the recycled water expansion, and again, we want to reserve because of the agreement, 1 year's debt service, which is $900,000, which is required as part of the loan agreement from the lender, which is basically the state. And basically, we're requesting to approve all fiscal policy recommendations and I would say reserve recommendations as part of the report. And again, that's the recommendation. Should be it. Are there any other questions at this point? All right. Thanks. No.
And I am going to be a little bit tenacious about that GFOA recommendation from last summer, so I'm going to go back in my notes and figure out what it was.
I found the scope, and I'm going to be emailing it to you momentarily.
Oh, great, thanks. Okay, because this is really, the notion of non-wasting reserves, where you take the 10 million and you can spend, let's say you got a 10% yield, you could, or 5%, so you had 500,000 every year you could use, reallocate, but you leave the reserve alone. There just seems like, putting all this money in place for the city in a good way, but also being able to take advantage of the money. I'm just thinking out loud. Thank you that you found the scope.
Well, I mean, it is currently invested. It's all.
Right, yeah.
The reserves are not quite, I mean, the return is not quite 10% on them, but that's, yeah.
Well, no, and then it gets into the, one of your funds here is going to be restricted, the water one, that you said that was a restricted reserve, I think?
That's correct.
Whereas others, we can move the money around, we just kind of know it's intended for this, but for flexibility, we can move. I don't know, it's a real, I think it's a real valuable area for the city to spend some time.
And one of the considerations as part of that reserve study, and we talked a little bit about it, was all the different requirements. There might be differences. I believe the initial one was done in the state of Colorado for Colorado Springs off the top of my head. California might have different laws as to how different funds can be used or how it's restricted to that fund's purpose, such as water funds. It can only be used for water operating costs or something like that. So even if a reserve is required, we wouldn't really be able to count on those reserves between the funds.
Right.
It's all cash, but again, you can't use restricted resources and move them around.
Right.
But the general fund is where the biggest flexibility is.
You're going to send us all that?
I'm sending it right now.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Ken Natz, Principal Civil Engineer, and I'll be discussing the capital project analysis this evening. The capital paper is made up of significant projects with a valuation of $1 million or more in the Capital Improvement Program's 6-year plan. We could call this slide the doom and gloom slide, I guess, but I preferably like to call it the age of replacement or rehabilitation. Based on, San Clemente is aging. We're coming into our own here as an older city, and consequently, we have a lot of older assets. Many of them are reaching the end of their useful lives. As a result, there's a significant maintenance that has been deferred and will have to be addressed in order to maintain the viable use of these facilities. These sentiments have been echoed over and over again throughout the presentation, and there's some ominous projections there in the financial forecast as related to the general fund projections with respect to with the addition of those capital projects. So we're really not alone here. The American Society of Civil Engineers ranks the nation's infrastructure as a D+. However, on the bright side, San Clemente has done a lot of good things with their public infrastructure. For example, we have had the street program, which has provided some of the best roadways in the county. We have our enterprise funds, which provides for the replacement and rehabilitation of our water and sewer assets through depreciation funding. We also have funding such as the Clean Ocean Funds, which have provided numerous improvements to the storm drain system to improve the water quality of our watersheds in the ocean. So, even though there's been some ominous projections, we really need to focus on the city buildings and park facilities because they've, in a sense, been left behind. So what are we going to do about this? Well, there's been some of this discussed here. In June 2014, the council approved the Lucity Computerized Maintenance Management System. This will be a tool that managers will use to better maintain these assets. Preventative maintenance measures will be put into this. As this data is processed by the system will be able to predictively trigger maintenance of these assets by staff in order to ensure that they're maintained at an adequate level of service. And once the CMS is fully optimized, it's going to take about 3 years to get all the data in and have that data processed. What we'll really be able to do is it will be able to take real numbers, labor costs, equipment costs, maintenance costs, and all these costs that are kind of in all these various silos right now, and combine them for us to develop an asset management plan that will predict the maintenance of these assets over the next 20, 30 years. So although we've done these predictions, it's hard to say whether they're going to get worse because this system is really powerful. It's very data hungry, and currently that system is almost configured in the Utilities Division, is rolling out into the Public Works Division. The go lives for these systems are scheduled in May and at the end of the year respectively, but again, it's going to take a few years to really get this data and have the system process this data to give us these long-term projections that we're looking for. And it's really kind of a a pay now or pay more later type of scenario. If we continue to neglect these assets, it's going to cost substantially more to maintain them when they're broken down, and those are going to cause disruptions to public services and potentially city staff if they're city buildings. So it's a really important road that we need to walk, and so we're trying to plan for the future and utilizing these tools along with some of the other things that were mentioned by Eric and Judy with respect to projecting what it's going to really take to maintain all these various assets, this huge portfolio of infrastructure that we have.
Ken,
Yes.
how are we with buy-in from staff on this, and how are we with training?
It's going very well.
you saying that?
There has been, obviously, there's been concerns initially with respect to management watching us. This is really going to be a tool that management is going to use, but slowly, the stakeholder pool was very large for the configuration of the system. And I think now the utility staff, at least, who's really had the most exposure at this time, is really seeing the value of this tool. Not only will it help us, but it's going to help them. It's going to put all this information in one place, which will allow them to do their work more quickly and more effectively. So these systems are very tough to get off the ground. The statistics are very poor. But I have to say, I'm fairly happy with the way it's going. Okay. We're right on track, and again, it's going to segue into Public Works here in the next couple weeks, and that's about an 8-month configuration. So the feedback has been very good.
Okay. In that vein, I would love to see some update on how this is going, maybe a demonstration of what the input is and what the output is, and what we're going to gain from this. I'd love to see something.
Maybe field demonstration. It might be kind of cool to see how, spits it out, what you go do. I'd like to see more practice as opposed to a presentation in here.
If we could add to that too a non-manager's perspective, the actual user of the program.
Most definitely. I think the council will be fairly impressed. I've been, we went into this with a vision, a paperless system that improves our work processes and makes it easier for the employees. And I think we've relatively succeeded in when that vision was. And I'd be happy to give a demonstration and show you all the functionality of the system.
And part of that demonstration would be just what Tim's talking about, a demonstration right here at the podium of the paperless power of this thing, because you can do this all on your tablet or phone, can't you?
That is
correct. Making all the entries. So that would be, I'd kind of like to see that.
And we need to enable it for Bob's flip phone too. So we have to.
You know, the capability is there with the phones. Flip phones don't have that much real estate, so it'll be hard to navigate those menus.
We tried, Bob. We tried.
But yeah, it's a very powerful tool, and I think the staff is actually, you know, the feedback I'm hearing from various staff is that they're very excited now that they're really starting to see the system kind of take shape. And they've all been involved in putting it together. So that's kind of been, I think, one of the things that really has provided that valuable input in order to make it such a successful tool for us. In addition to that, it includes the payroll process for the employees. So when they generate a work order, that work order time is reflected right back to a timesheet. So we'll be able to really track what what does it cost to maintain a fire hydrant? Well, you know, why did it take, you know, this guy 2 hours and it took this guy 8 hours? So there's some real detailed things that we can do with it, and I'm very excited to show it to you.
Great.
Wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving right along, these are the projects that were identified and looked into with respect to the capital project analysis. I direct the council to page 104 of the LTFP. There's a lot of footnotes associated with these numbers in order to you know, just not keep the slide not so busy. I kept the footnotes off of there, but we can speak to some of these numbers if the council has questions. There's a lot of just funding, you know, assumptions, and with respect to kind of how some of these numbers were put up there. The council's seen the top three. These are, I'll call these usual suspects. They've been in previous LTFPs, with the latter two being some of the newer projects that were added in this year, which kind of echo the sentiments that Eric mentioned at the beginning of his presentation with respect to really trying to focus in on the city facility maintenance for the parks.
Ken, this first top row here, $252,000 is budgeted for the sand project. What happens when that doesn't come to fruition? That money just goes straight back into the general fund?
You know, I'm going to have to defer to who I call the sand czar.
Okay.
Man of many names.
The sand czar, I like that. That's a new one.
Sorry, Tom.
Thanks for the promotion. I couldn't hear the question in full. Would you?
So the $252,000 for the sand project, what happens the next fiscal year when we don't spend that money? Or is that money already spent?
I think that's budgeted for planning, wasn't it?
Right. So that's not in the 2016 budget. That's looking ahead.
Okay.
We're currently budgeted through design, but to get to what I think you're asking is, right now, unless we get other council direction or funding sources, we look to have help, outside funding help to do the project. If we don't have it, we won't be able to do a project. But this money isn't budgeted yet. It's kind of a projection.
It's projection. And then my next question we'll have you up here is the trail extension. I know it has the asterisk with 88% is covered by grants. So what would be the total cost to the city?
It would, yeah, can you?
Yes, I know.
Okay.
Sorry, didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm not a trail czar, sorry.
Yeah. You know what the trails are? Wrong kind of sand, Tom?
No, that's Mr. Petras, but I think I can answer the question.
Okay.
Well, as you know, the council awarded the design for the project recently, a few months ago. $200,000 was budgeted for design, $100,000 from a coastal conservancy grant, $100,000 from the general fund. $900,000 is projected to construct the project. That 88% is attributed to that $900,000 of the construction figure. So it's roughly about $100,000 city
additional.
Yeah, city contribution in order to realize that project.
Okay.
So it'd be 88% of the $900,000. So $100K give or take.
Me gusta.
Yeah.
That means I like it.
Wow.
Just
Si,
wanted to
senor.
translate that
Si,
for you.
senor.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to the sand project just real quick, because the construction funding of the $4 million there for the initial project also is predicated on grant funding. Staff is seeking a grant from the Department of Boating and Waterways in the tune of 85% of that total value. So the city's contribution there would be approximately $600,000 from the general fund in order to realize that project. Staff would recommend that we continue to pursue that grant, although, you know, there's really an unknown here if that's going to happen. It's projected that contribution would come sometime in fiscal year 17.
Ken, before you leave that, weren't there some benefit numbers that we couldn't measure up to for the sand project?
Yes, you are correct.
That was on the federal level, though, wasn't
At
it?
the federal level, there's I guess the project is below the typical federal funding level of the benefit cost ratio. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I believe it was the federal level is a 2.5 and the city's project is a 1.4. My understanding is that they're looking at changing that policy in order to realize this project. There's a lot of other benefits to the project with respect to protection of the railroad, so there might be some wiggle room with respect to realizing the project in the sense of not meeting that federal cost-benefit ratio.
That's from the Corps of Engineers?
I'm not sure who in the federal government actually dictates that, and maybe Tom might know.
So yes, there is a benefit cost issue. The project, as Ken said, it's 1.4. That's good. And as far as the Corps is concerned, when you're over 1, you generate more benefits than cost for the project, and that's a good thing. But even then, with limited dollars at the federal level, they start looking for higher numbers. And typically, lately, projects haven't been getting funded until you reach the 2.5 level. And so there's been that issue, and I'm going to be careful not to go too far off track. So we're not the only project, West Coast project, that necessarily is in that same boat. And we don't know if the Corps will get a go-ahead this year to even move forward. I'm working on a separate update for the city manager and your council to figure out what it all means. As far as the Corps is concerned, like I said, we're meeting their criteria, but are we really that competitive compared to their limited dollars and how they spread them around? Right now, it's looking challenging.
Thank you.
Any questions on the Army Corps of Engineers, the rail corridor project, before I move on?
And I just want to touch on a couple of things really quick as we kind of go through this theme of doom and gloom. I apologize. You know, we have these CIPs in our budget, but we have them with the assumptions that grant funding are going to offset the costs. And it's important to give that disclaimer to council. If grant funding doesn't come in, it only obviously impacts the project costs, and it also affects our unassigned fund balance. And we talked about there's a $3.4 million fund balance that we're going to project at the end of this budget year. I always want to leave a little bit of that money on the table because throughout the budget year we do appropriate fund balance for certain things that come up throughout the year. But one of the messages I have to keep communicating is, you know, we have well over, and Ken can go into it, of what are we projecting for 2016 for our CIP budget if we had everything we wanted?
From the CIP stakeholder groups that have met, it's over $4 million. I'm not sure of the...
And so that's just for 16, and we only have about 3.4. So we already know we don't have enough to do what we want to do. And for instance, on the rail corridor pedestrian beach trail extension, we've got the design portion covered, but we have not yet hit the construction costs. And so I just want to give complete transparency to the council that we could have issues. The pier is another thing that we've talked about, but are you going to get into city facilities as well?
I will.
Okay, good. I'll wait and hold my comments for that.
Okay, moving right along to the municipal pier. The pier is on a 5-year cyclical replacement basis, so to speak, in order to maintain its viability because it's, you know, exposed to the harsh marine environment. The last pier rehabilitation was completed in 2011. So staff would recommend that the council allocate $200,000 in fiscal year 16 for design and $1 million for construction in fiscal year 17 from the general fund, and that'll be forthcoming when we present the capital improvement program budget in the next couple months.
Ken, I just want to add on that one, since we're talking about grants a little bit. I did a little, of everything we're talking about tonight, the pier is number one for me in terms of making sure it's protected and celebrated as part of our long-term planning. So there's lots of grant money available for California piers, and I mentioned this last year. And so I'm going to encourage staff to look seriously at grant opportunities. There looks like there might be money through a thing called Save America's Treasures. The Ventura Pier created itself as a 501c3, and that made them eligible for all sorts of funding opportunities. The Pacifica Pier gets hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Wildlife Conservation Board. So the point is, and I'm even happy to help with this if you want a layman on the outside, but there might be money available that way over and above the general fund that recognizes that in addition to this being a piece of infrastructure, it's iconic, it's historic, it's a California treasure, and we're charged with its stewardship.
appreciate your research, and
Yeah,
we'll have the
so-
staff who's
Yeah,
dealing
and
directly
these,
with the
you know,
pier. I'll make note of that.
And with grant, you have to look at like 500 to find the one that's a perfect fit, but so these are just like examples. Look at Malibu also, so.
Is this, let me ask this question. I don't know if it seems obvious, but is this asset insured? If we had a large storm tomorrow, like we did in the 80s, where it broke in two, is this insured for that?
It is insured under our
It is by
JPI plan.
CJPIA.
Nice. What would be terrible is if we had subsidence
There you-
and a pure breakage.
You said, you had to say it. Don't say subsidence.
I didn't say it with my club.
Okay. Then it didn't count.
Lori, I got to commend you on this one because since I've been on council, you've been talking doom and gloom about the pier and how much in the hole we are with the pier. And this year, you finally came with some solutions, which is pretty exciting. So as opposed to just scaring everybody in the audience,
I know,
Yeah.
I'm doom and glooming everyone. I have no solution.
this time you have some solutions. So I'm excited.
That you support.
Yeah, oh,
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
So you'll be on the subcommittee.
Well, since people are just giving 513Cs willy-nilly, I think we should get one for the pier, right?
POP, protect our pier.
Not that we can think of any other 513Cs offhand.
Oh, no, I can't.
Thank you for your research. We'll definitely look into those, and we'll update the council here. Hopefully, in the CIP budget process, we'll have some news on those potential funding sources if they are available. So, segueing into the city facilities rehabilitations, the city's conducted numerous rehabilitations over the last year on numerous of the city buildings. I'll refer the council to page 109 in the LTFP that shows a comprehensive listing of all the facilities that were evaluated. These facilities really are in need of just a lot of TLC, primarily with the the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing components of the buildings, in addition to other smaller items. The cumulative total of that is approximately about $3.75 million. What staff recommends there is that we leverage Lucity here over the next few years, and we allow the Public Works Maintenance Services Division, who really has their hands on these assets at all times, to help us project these into the next year's capital outlay. So as a point of disclosure, if you look at the fiscal year 15 capital outlay, a lot of these facilities weren't in there because those facility assessments were not completed. So we'd be looking to add these in, and we can update the council here when we bring forward the budget in a couple months on how those will lay in.
Ken, what are these buildings A, J, K, N?
Those are the buildings at the corporate yard.
Okay.
So at the treatment plant facility, it's the maintenance building, it's the administration building for the treatment plant operations, and some of the operators.
And this is a good segue for Councilmember Baker with regards to the City Hall. So if you notice under the city facilities rehabilitation, City Hall has been designated needing $2.5 million in
We're actually going to talk about
improvements.
this? Wow.
And I want to cover a couple of things in terms of trying to look for direction from the council. So segueing into that, in the 2014 LTFP, we looked at marine safety relocation. And the direction the council was given was, staff, you know best. So go, rather than hire a consultant, go find where staff thinks a relocation of the marine safety headquarters can be. And if you refer back to the introduction where we provide statuses of all of those things, one of the things that we're going to be proposing as part of the 2016 budget is not relocating the marine safety building, but rather leaving it where it's at in its place and funding repair costs for the seawall and other necessary improvements to marine safety rather than relocating it. And some of those uncertainties have to do with the sand replenishment, because the location that was kind of designated as a relocation point was the pier bowl, moving it back further. And the sand replenishment is a big question mark with the council. Obviously, there's still federal issues that need to be resolved, and if those don't get resolved, then it comes back to the council. Do we want to dedicate $12 million or seek those monies to do this project? And so, with the marine safety being part of the proposed CIP coming forward in the budget process, with city facility rehabilitations, we had left the council from the last LTFP at coming up with ideas of City Hall. I will defer to the city manager. However, originally the Civic Center relocation was based on selling this property, and there was a $11 to $16 million price tag that we used as an assumption of the revenues from this. We did get away from that in the last LTFP and basically said leave police downstairs, but maybe we leave and go over there. Both buildings need improvements. This building needs a significant amount of improvements, and I'll look to Ken to maybe elaborate on those if there's council questions. we don't have the money. And so we need to look at council to say, do you want us to pursue continuing to look at relocation of this Calle Negocio? We've kind of sunsetted the leases, so nobody goes beyond 2018. So that decision, if made, we have a drop dead date that we could begin doing this. But we know we have to do improvements to this facility sooner than later. And we also know we have to do improvements to Calle Negocio, not only improvements to get us in there, but ADA improvements as well. And we would lose potential revenue from those spaces that we would be moving into that we would typically lease out. And so I kind of look to the city manager if he wants to interject his opinion on this. I know that was brought up earlier.
Well, it's obvious it needs a lot of study and everything, but, from my standpoint, being the new person, I think it's hard to manage the city being in two different locations. Ideally, I'd like to be in one location, be in the same location with Public Works and Community Development, but cost-wise, I just, in all my conversations with Bill Cameron and Eric, I just don't know that we have the funding to do it right now or anytime soon. But it'll take, take some looking into and more follow-up.
Well, I really think it's something we need to, we've seen Mr. Jorgensen's reports from many years ago when the talk was about selling this piece of property. And we kind of decided we didn't want to do that because of the issues with the police requiring so much space. But I think we should, I think this council should, give the city manager the go-ahead to do a study and delve into this and talk about leaving the police here, refurbishing or leaving this space just like it is until we get a tenant here who will do some tenant improvements and fix it up just like they want it. This is the space that we're going to rent out because we're still going to have the police downstairs. And talking about moving all these offices over to Negocio, and those tenants are going to leave. Because I think it's, frankly, in my meetings with the city manager, when issues come up, it would be very nice if we could just walk down the hall and talk to Mr. Cameron or
The CD director,
yeah,
community development director.
Community development director. I think it's a valuable, hard to quantify those kind of numbers, but I think it's valuable to have everybody in one place. And I think we should get on that trail and get rolling with it instead of just paying lip service to it. I think we've got some things in place. We've got the leases set up so that we can do it. But if we continue to delay, then those leases are going to run out, and we're going to have to say, well, we're going to be in the real estate business over there as a landlord for another 5 years. And I think we ought to get going here and do something like that. So I'm going to, I'm in favor of that. I think we should get rolling.
I think I'm the exact opposite of what you're saying, Bob. I think we need to look at other potential options. I think when that building was purchased, it was purchased as an investment opportunity, not to be the civic center. And somehow it morphed into this idea of, well, maybe we can turn it into a civic center. I think this is a much better location or an ulterior location. I think we need to look at other options. I don't think it's an either or. I think there may be some bigger, better option out there that we haven't heard.
That can certainly, if you got another idea, Chris, that'll be part of the study. If that's a better idea, if there's some idea that's out there, please write it down and let's have that part of the conversation. But what I don't want us to do is to continue to do nothing. That's what I don't want us to do.
Well,
I want us to do something.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I'm not in favor of moving City Hall to Negocio. I don't think it just doesn't make sense. And as far as we need to talk about and vet out the idea of leaving police services downstairs and renting this out, and what kind of revenue stream we actually get from that. And is that worth the cost or the benefit of moving city services over to Negocio?
Well, those are the things I want to talk about, because I personally would like to have the city manager in the same building as his department heads. I think the value to the city in having him be able to oversee the departments right on the premises versus driving 10 minutes to get to them, or having the department heads drive 10 minutes over here, is very valuable from the perspective of being a good manager. I think it makes things much easier to be in the same building.
I agree. And preferably, we would all be in the same building. And I think we could do a study that would look at Negocio. We could look at a study for this site, and we could look to see if there's other options within the city to put City Hall. We could take that on if that's the council's direction.
James, how much longer do we have to pay on that building, Negocio? How many more years? 6 more years?
Wow.
And then we own it?
That was a yes, by the way. Just from Tom.
Yes.
Tom Rendino.
Okay.
What were you going to say, Tim? Oh.
So, to your point, you're saying if we just kept Negocio, we kept tenants in there, we get it paid off in 6 years, then it's revenue generating, and you want to start looking for something else now.
Yeah.
Po-
Or sell the property. And, yeah, because that was what the intention at the beginning was. When it was
I've never
purchased in the
heard
early
that.
'90s, it was intended to
Okay,
be.
so for tonight's purposes, let's just say, yeah, we agree, right?
We're
Wanna
gonna
make it a
agendize it?
priority? Or what, you
Well,
tell us what
We're not making it a
the plan of
priority.
attack needs to be.
Hey, Bill.
Just to make a comment, since I've been around here for a while, is there was a study done by my predecessor, Dave Lund, a number of years ago for the city that looked at, I'd say 6 or 8 different options, different locations in the city. And what was determined by that study was the Negocio site was by far the least expensive, but because to go out and try to buy another site and build a city hall, as I remember, was 4 or 5 times as much as trying to rehabilitate that building and modify it so that we could make it usable for the city. So that is a huge factor here. So I don't know if there's really that much, if we don't have the funding to go out and study a whole bunch of different sites, is probably not going to be too fruitful. It's probably better mainly to look at these two unless we have some other site that we own right now.
Thanks, Bill. So would you want to agendize this for discussion at council meeting, or what?
Let me talk to staff some more internally, and I'll produce a memo for you, and then I'll for consideration, and then we'll bring it back on the agenda at a
On the
later
agenda.
date.
Okay.
Well, you know, let me just share my thoughts on this, is that ultimately, we do have a somewhat dispersed city staff. You know, we have the Public Works Yard, we have Beaches, Parks, and Rec that's down in the community center, we have the golf course, we have community development, we have City Hall here, not to mention everyone that's out in trucks and different folks that are working. I think that the objective of having everyone on the roof is noble, and I think it is an ideal situation, but ultimately we also live in an age where electronically you do most of the things you need to do. And so I'd be curious from a leadership point of view, because I manage 4 offices from my office in San Diego in 4 separate countries. And so, you know, I do like physical presence. That's really valuable, but it's not completely necessary. It's a luxury more than a necessity. And so I'd really like to understand from a leadership perspective, you know, if there's a way we can optimize our existing usages so that if we do want to have that kind of concurrence, that you could maybe relocate city manager here, have certain city staff, et cetera, and see if there's maybe a different way of approaching this issue, either using combination of technology or other solutions. But, you know, just my 2 cents. You know, let me put it this way. There's a benefit to having everyone under one roof, and there's a cost. And at this point, I'm not seeing the benefit outweighing the cost.
I think if you looked at most cities, you would find that Parks and Rec and the Public Works Utility Yard is typically off-site and isolated from City Hall. But you have those core services of police headquarters, finance, HR, Public Works, you know, engineering, and community development are usually situated all together. And, you know, I think technology is great, and Bill does a great job of responding. The community development director does a great job in responding to me via email or phone call when I call up. But there is something great about being able to walk into someone's office and pose a question to them and talk to them face to face and see that reaction and have that conversation in more of an impromptu manner instead of getting a email. Not that Bill varnishes it when he sends it to me, but, you know, he has a chance to think about it a little bit more. And so, you know, but it is a difficult thing for the city to contemplate with the expenses that it would cost.
Okay.
And frankly, Bill, that the study that Mr. Lund did left out what I think is the most viable option, which is what I spoke about tonight, leaving the cops here, because that was part of the huge expenses in some of those scenarios that he laid out was because the cops require so much space. But if we leave them here, we take that out of the equation, and that wasn't really done in that study. So if part of that can be leave the cops here, move everything on the top floor out to Negocio and rent this place out, if that can be part of that scenario, then, and Chris will have another idea that he thinks is better, and if anybody else has got some other idea up their sleeve that they think is better, please let the city manager know, because I just don't want us to do nothing. I want us to do something and look at some options here, because
Well, as we evaluate the police contract, maybe we'll find out we don't need as many. Exactly. We're paying for it. We're paying for it, so we might as well put them there.
Well, I look forward to seeing the memo and agendizing this item, because I think we do need to discuss it.
marvelous.
Yeah, more than just tonight. So hopefully this year.
It'll happen.
Great.
This fiscal year or the calendar year?
Unlike sidewalks.
Moving
Kathy's-
on
that
to
was
the
a Kathy's
next
end.
item.
Sidewalks.
I brought this up last year about maybe we could defer the Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Master Plan for a year or
Correct.
so.
Pam Passo's here to talk a little bit about
Okay,
it, so.
But and before she does, I see this as the year of flawless execution for Beaches, Parks, and Recreation. We have the new playground, we have the Ole Hansen Beach Club, we have some restrooms, we have 4 new parks coming online in Marblehead, and there's things that I'm sure I'm not even, yeah, the beach trail expansion. So I kind of feel like this should be the year of flawless execution, and then we can figure out what the next, basically celebrating and protecting what we have, rather than, being as future focused. There's a lot of moving parts, and I think at this time next year, we'll have a better sense of what it is that we want to master plan. So, that would help with cash flow. I'm not saying not do it, I'm just saying push it down the calendar.
We can do that. But, however, there's always a however with me. I think it's really important to understand what the master plan will do. This is not just about putting a bunch of money into future development. This is about assessing what we currently have, which is what we've been talking about a lot tonight, is with the CMMS, I can never say it right. I always want to do different letters on it. It's really us understanding what it is that we have and protecting what we also have. But it's also thinking about, as we're looking at these future maintenance projects, is that we want to make sure that we're not maintaining something that maybe we don't need. And so if you take a tennis court, for example, and you say, okay, so now let's refurbish this tennis court. Well, maybe we find out from this study is that we don't actually need any tennis courts in that side of town. And maybe we need to have pickleball, and maybe we don't need, or maybe we don't need anything. And so nobody cares about the parks on that side of town or in this section because there's so many amenities in that area. The other thing that this looks at is not just the city amenities, it also looks to see what other opportunities are available. So a lot of our community, especially when you look at our newer community, there's a lot of HOA amenities and a lot of private amenities. And so it looks at that and says, okay, we have all of these different things that are available to our community. So it might not be that every single resident has the ability to go to some of these amenities, but the people that are living in that area have that ability. And so it's really looking at it as more of a comprehensive plan. And we haven't done one since 1990. And so we're really overdue, and part of our general plan said that we would be doing this every 10 years, and we're trying to be able to do that. So this isn't just hey, let's see what else we can build. It's really looking at what we already have. It's also looking at some opportunities for working with partners. And so it may be, we've been doing this in recreation for 20 years, but maybe we shouldn't be doing it because down the street, another organization has been doing it and they've been doing a great job. Have you thought about actually moving that service over to this organization instead? So it's really looking at a bigger picture than just what else can we build. Part of the RFP put in there is that we are not looking for somebody to come in and tell us all these things that we need and build out. We pretty much told them we're almost built out at this point. So it's really looking at more of what do we have, where should we be going, what direction, and looking at some cost recovery in some of those areas as well.
And I appreciate the expanded explanation. And I guess my point was a little bit different, which is let's hit the marks on this huge list in terms of the priorities in front of beaches, parks, and recreation. I mean, after public safety, this is our single biggest line item, is beaches, parks, and recreation. And so let's just make sure these things that we've got going get done. And then, my colleagues may feel differently, but I'm just saying by 12 months.
I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to bring it up anyway. So I appreciate the extra description we got, but I think pushing this back a year is not going to put us in a terrible position. I think we have a lot of big decisions to make, and $150,000, quite frankly, is a lot of money for a study.
We don't have anything waiting on this being done. I know that we proceeded headlong on a few projects that we were saying, oh, let's wait for this, but ultimately, is there anything that's in a standstill until this gets completed? That would be the only thing that would be.
I don't believe so.
Because there is a cost to wait in some of these, either bidding environment or pushing out an amenity that our residents would really enjoy. And so if there's nothing waiting on it, then we do have a lot of things online. I, for one, as a part of this, would also like to look at the way we're using our existing assets and how efficiently we're using them. Now, I don't know if that's part of the master plan.
It is.
Yeah, then I looked at it as pretty compelling reason to do it, but maybe it's not as compelling when, for example, the beach club isn't even online and you can't look at, optimizing it.
Once the new facilities come online, then we can take a look at that. I think pushing us out 12 months is not going to put us in.
Just as a reminder that the $150,000 is budgeted in this fiscal year, and so pushing it out is just moving that money from this fiscal year to next fiscal year. So it's not about your next year's budget.
That's the point you made, is that really it's just trying to get everything completed accurately and well this year, and maybe not taking that on at the same time, the planning. And so it's not really about money, it's more about our staff time and the facilities.
So I think what I hear council saying, and I think Pam's in agreement, is we'll push it off for a year, but we'll definitely kind of revet and revisit the structure of the RFP with the Beaches and Park Recreation Commission and bring it back to council once we have an award in the next following fiscal year.
I really like what you said there, Pam, about talking about what we have and how we're using it and what's available. I really like that. You hit it right on the nose for me. So I thought that was great. So.
Thank you. It's going to be a great plan. Eventually.
You ever need to do it.
And how are the tennis courts at Bonita Canyon holding up, by the way?
We're going to bulldoze them. She said we don't need them on that side of the freeway.
They're holding up, okay.
They're holding up, okay.
But
We knew that when we did it. Okay, good. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think this is.
okay.
I think this is the next level for BP&R because once we finish Marblehead, we really have attained, and Courtney's, we've attained most of the big ticket projects that we had on the horizon outside of Sunset Park and the bathroom. So, there's no longer are we taking on these huge projects in this visioning process. At that point, it's looking backwards at everything we built and said, how do we maintain it? How do we subscribe it better? How do we program it better? How do we align costs with, what we're doing? And I think that's the next level that San Clemente is going to be attaining, not only on beaches, parks, but also on planning and a number of other items that we're reaching a kind of a new phase for us that we haven't been in for a while. So. Can we call it the Bob Baker Memorial? Yeah. Commemorative building.
Are you going to knock me off or something, Brown? I mean, I'm really getting a complex over here about this.
I think that one day you're going to become a hermit. You're going to be hiding in your basement all day long. That's why we want to remember you.
I would call it reaching a paradigm shift, so to speak, just quoting the 7 Habits. Just to conclude here on the slide, It's important to note that the latter two projects that are listed, those are in fiscal year, those are 2015 dollars. Obviously, the other projects that are listed in the top, those are closer to being realized. So those numbers are a little bit probably tighter. But it's important to note that the bidding environment with the construction costs going up and CPI going up, the costs continue to rise. So I just wanted to make sure that the council was aware that those numbers are in 2015 dollars. So with that, I'd like to recommend that the council approve the capital project analysis recommendations as listed in the agenda report, and I'd be happy to answer any additional questions.
And just for the council's reedification, some of those recommendations have actually changed based on some of the council directions. So it might be best to do individual recommendations for the sand, or do them all as one. Sand project, the beach trail extension, and I'm referring to page 112 of your LTFP to see those recommendations. Municipal pier, and obviously facilities, but Beaches Park Recreation Master Plan, basically the change in direction is to postpone for a year before this is done, so that would change a little bit of that direction.
So we have staff recommendations that we're going through on the agenda.
Yes.
Right? And has there been any change so far that you can ascertain, Joanne, as to staff recommendations and any council direction? It looks like it's lined up pretty consistently until now. Is that right? I haven't really noted anything.
Well, are you talking about all the other ones we've done thus far?
Well, yeah, everything we've gone so far.
Everything you've done thus far has been copacetic and in line with the staff
Okay, so
recommendations.
now we're really looking at the capital projects analysis, and then there's 5 staff recommendations here.
Okay, we'll come back on that one, okay.
Okay.
So we'll have to revisit the reserve one, but we can do that later in the LTFP. So yeah, for the capital projects, we're looking at postponing the Beaches Park master plan for 12 months.
Okay.
And I do want to give a disclaimer for Councilmember Bob Baker for number 4, city facilities rehabilitation. We're seeking the recommendation to fund the facilities rehabilitations as prescribed in the report. One of those improvements is the $2.5 million for the city hall. That staff is recommending that we do fund to make the necessary improvements to City Hall. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there and seek council direction if that's something that you still want to pursue, or if you'd like to take that off the table.
We need to look at that closer.
Well, I, for one, would certainly like to take that off the table because that's contingent on the outcome of, are we packing up the moving vans or not, frankly.
Understood.
So there's a modification of 4. So 1, 2, and 3 line up pretty well. And then it's 4 that has that
Minus
change.
City Hall,
Yeah,
correct.
minus City Hall. And then 5, which is postponed for 12 months. Okay.
And the only other thing, somewhere, since we're reviewing all, the sale of the La Pata Vista Hermosa corner, is that something you're asking us to make a decision on?
No, that is not something that you're
So
making.
it's not buried in-
We're hearing direction in terms of not selling the property, but looking at lease things, but that wasn't a recommendation that we needed tonight.
Great, thank you.
Great question, Lori.
Well, I've got a question though, Eric. On page 110 and 111, when we talk about the projects down at the bottom of page 110, we're talking about fiscal year 2019 and 20, 21, 28, and 19. We're talking about these. Are you looking for direction on these, or are you just warning us about?
We're just
these?
warning you. That's part of our 6-year CIP plan that
Okay.
will become part of the proposed budget process. So again, your action tonight is only giving us direction as we put together the final CIP plan to present to council as part of 16, and only looking at funding for 16. However, these still exist on the CIP 6-year table, whether it's start funding in 17, 18, or 19.
Okay, because we have had some restroom discussions, and we've had some restroom ideas pending the outcome of the base of the pier restroom, and we'll all get to see what that looks like. It would seem to me that these kind of expenditures for all these other restrooms would seem to be way out of line. The use, the cost benefit doesn't measure up on those. We talked about that earlier, and we kind of got caught up in this restroom thing, but it seems to me like if we're going to put these on the budget, put these in the budget for future years, we should certainly, before this LTFP comes up in its time frame, we should have that discussion, because to me, those things need to be gone over with a magnifying glass, because they need you know, scrubbed and painted, but they don't need a $460,000 rehab.
And to your point, we're on the same page. Public Works will be coming back to present you with options with the 2 current bathrooms that are in the queue for rehabilitation, both T Street and Boca.
In 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. And so at that point, you're going to be able to make a decision whether you do just the simple
Marvelous.
improvements or the extravagant ones, and then those themes will carry out on the other bathroom projects in coming years.
So Bill Cameron's way ahead of me again. Is that kind of what you're saying there, Eric?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say that it's basic versus extravagant, because we're talking about some significant improvements with ADA requirements like we were with the other one. It's the style of the restrooms is what we're really bringing back to you, but not just painting them, but actually bringing them up to ADA standards, which significantly adds to the cost because we have to reconfigure those.
Well, I hope that's...
And the prices that we're coming in at, you're correct, are higher than what's shown on here, and we will be reflecting that in the budget if the council directs us to proceed with those projects.
Well, I'm hoping that part of the staff report is going to say we can also paint, clean up, and replace a couple of fixtures for, you know, a lot less money, and not do all the...
I think we're kind of in a no man's land, because if we do enough work, we're going to be required to do ADA improvements in those restrooms, and they don't meet those standards now. They weren't built that way to begin with.
I thought there was some discussion in regards to whether or not those are going to be ADA requirements because of the location of them.
Right, whether they could get to that location.
Yeah.
Well, we have a beach trail that has ADA access, so we can talk about it some more. I don't want to drag this out tonight, but I'll look at it with staff again and try to be prepared for the meeting in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Before we move on from this item, because I think I was interpreting this a little differently. Looking at page 109, the line items, the facilities as you go down. So, you know, when I read this, Eric, and help me out here, is the last paragraph says no major work on City Hall is planned until the decision is made on whether or not. So how did we include the $2.5 million? It says right here. I didn't expect that to be a decision for this evening. So, but we just discussed with Bob that it was.
And I'll look to Ken to talk about, there was a study that had been done some time ago, or initiated some time ago, to review all of these sites for their necessary improvements, and I'll let Ken elaborate a little bit more on that, just to communicate how that came up.
I think my concern is that, you know, on one hand, you have this graph saying it's included, but then, you know, a paragraph later, it's saying that it's not included. So
it really reflects the estimate of cost to bring the facility up to an adequate level of service per current standards. In addition to the ADA, there's geotechnical issues. So really, the table is just what you see. It's the table that you know, indicates the cost that's been assessed by a consultant to improve the facility.
Okay.
The segue there with the paragraph just has to do with, well, it's obviously we're not going to spend money here if in fact we're going to do the adaptive reuse. So does that help answer that question?
Well, no, because I guess I got to go by a couple of other line items here. So I'm looking at the Steed Park. I know it costs us a lot more money to do things than other people, but $205,000 we could rebuild a new snack shack for that price. Is that what we're planning on doing?
The snack shack is included as part of Steed Park. I believe there's also some improvements as part of the skate park area, and there's also some improvements as part of the main concession stand in Steed Park. So that's
a lot of work, not just the concession
cumulative
stand.
total of Steed Park.
Okay, and then as far as the T Street concession is concerned, you know, everything that I've talked to with Bill and other staff members, that's something that's coming up for review. So, is that not included in tonight's decision, or it is included in tonight's decision?
What I think what the decision, or the way that I would project it, would be that realistically, since these assessments weren't prepared till after the budget was, the 15-year budget was actually approved by council, these aren't actually projected in any of the 6-year outlays.
Okay.
So the staff's recommendation is to allow staff to project these projects into the 6-year outlay, which unfortunately will
not next year's budget.
More doom and gloom.
Okay.
But just so they're shown in the 6-year outlay, and I'm sorry, so we can get a better handle on what the future expenditures are going to be.
Okay.
So
Got it.
really, it's a matter of allowing the Public Works Maintenance Division, with their expertise and their hands on these assets, to say, look, you know, we know this one's really in dying need.
Ken, you went way above and beyond. There's some miscommunication here between this fiscal year and 6 years out, so you've clarified it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification to our recommendations.
At what point do we read all the recommendations into the record?
We've got 2 more pages of recommendations we have to get through tonight still.
Joanne, do we read them all at the end?
We could do it at the end, we could do it now. however you want
Let's
to do it. We've done it both
let's
ways
just
before.
muscle through this if we could, you guys. We need to get efficient. It's 8 o'clock and not get any earlier.
All right, Brian, thank you.
Good evening. All right, muscle through it. Got it.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Brian Brower, Information Technology Analyst, and I'm here to present the Information Technology Strategic Plan. So this strategic plan is a roadmap for future technology projects and initiatives for the city. It's a proactive approach where we're mapping out everything into the next 5 years, and in some cases looking beyond that at what our needs are going to be. It's also meant to serve as a financial planning instrument. It's been, it was developed in concert with the long-term financial plan, and you'll notice that the schedule that is at the end of the paper, you will find is a pretty close replica to what you see in our CIP budget, where we map out different projects and a cost related to that project over the next number of years. It's intended to be a dynamic plan. We, with all the cool gadgetry we have in IT, we do not have a crystal ball. We know that there will be some things in a couple of years, some technology that we can't currently identify in a plan. So this is our best guess at what we think we're going to need and when we're going to need it. Knowing that, we do intend to update the plan on an annual basis and report back to council as different technologies emerge and business needs for the city develop into the future. The primary goal of the plan was to make sure that the investments that the city makes with technology are properly aligned with the priorities and goals of all of our departments doing the work and providing services. We want to make sure that projects are coordinated properly throughout the city, meaning that it's a citywide holistic effort to establish priorities, balance the workload from year to year, and to avoid duplicate efforts. Another main goal of the process was to engage all the stakeholders throughout the city through something that's new to our city, which is an IT steering committee. We've put together a committee that includes managers and stakeholders from all the different departments and divisions throughout the city in order to participate in the process of allocating IT resources and setting priorities for the future. So how do we define a strategic project? It's fairly simple. In most cases, a strategic project either adds a service or enhances the way that we deliver a current service to the public, or in other cases, we're improving internal processes, making staff more efficient in how they perform their jobs. There's also some strategic projects that either are aimed to reduce current costs or replace outdated or obsolete systems. The process for this particular strategic plan began several months ago when we surveyed all the departments, and we wanted to develop a long list of all their IT, their technology wants and needs. We compiled those into a very long list. People didn't hold back, at least I don't think they did. We then presented that list to the IT steering committee, and with the IT steering committee, we discussed the prioritization and the timing of all those projects. And then we further refined the list and developed the 5-year plan that includes estimated costs and potential staffing requirements for the implementation and the ongoing support of all these different projects. And then that was the basis for the report that's in front of you tonight. And with your direction, the items that are proposed in the coming budget year will be brought forth through the normal budget process.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, you can.
On page 130, your 5-year summary.
Yes, I was
what
just going to
line
bring
item?
that up.
What line item has to deal with the amount of storage that we have? How many years that we'll put, information on our website? We have 2 years on there now. Is there any line item that talks about that, increasing that?
There actually is. There is a project right at, trying to view this schedule up on the screen, I realize it's close to impossible because there's so much information up there. But if you look on 130, about halfway down under City Manager and City Clerk, there is a project called Electronic Document Search Enhancement with Public Interface. That does address your question to some degree because this is a system that has the potential to take agendas, city records that are deemed as open public information. So things like minutes, agenda reports, packets, that type of information. I assume that's where your question's coming from.
Yes. We only have 2 years stored right now.
There's 2 years on our current website due to website limitations, but this is a product that once implemented, we could actually potentially expose to the public as almost a sub-website access for people to search through these archives themselves rather than putting it on the city's website where we have recreation content and everything else.
How would that work, a sub-website for a resident? How would that work?
It would be the product that we've explored at this point in order to develop this particular project on the list is it's a search tool that it's similar to Google. You basically type in a search string and it searches all functions of our EDMS system and returns the query. So people would be able to search based on search word, dates, types of information.
And they would be directed to this website when they searched for that?
Well, yeah, this would be a website that we would probably include either as a framed page or a link off of our existing city website and would function off of a separate server because it's a separate product. It's not a product that is provided by our current website provider.
Brian, what's the approval process on each of these? Are you bringing these back on separate line items, or are you asking for us to buy off on this all right now conceptually?
All of these, sorry to cut you off, all of these would be separate line items that would come before the council through the normal budget process. Most of them would be decision packages in the budget that you would have the opportunity to deliberate.
And so the direction we're providing now is, yes, it looks like the plan is solid. We look forward to more detail. Is that the direction?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that we're going to get a lot more direction on each of these items. I am particularly fascinated with a lot of the online building permit applications. That implementation, especially with the new planning director coming in, if we're going to go out to recruitment. Also, BPNR, how we can get people to do online application. There's all sorts of ways this could go. I do like the idea of a strategic plan. And give me an idea, is this unprecedented, or it seems like we had items before, but is this a new offering here?
Since I've worked here, there hasn't been anything quite like this, no.
So this is really a snapshot that we haven't had previously. We've always had items, like website items and these things, but it came up more based on a need, and now this is being more directed in a.
And one of the things I talked about early on as kind of my introduction was some new long-term strategies. This IT strategic plan is one of those. So very much how you're accustomed to seeing a 6-year CIP plan every year, I will be integrating this into a regular process as well. So you'll be seeing this. And again, with all of these forecasts, they're subject to change. Certain things change from year to year, and we may say, this technology is no longer valid and we need to go to a different direction, and we change some of the things. So there's a fluid concept here, but this really addresses all of our needs. And again, one of the things that I talked about is deferring maintenance costs. We've done a great job of maintaining streets, partially to thank you to Mr. Bill Cameron, but we also have internal infrastructures. We have to issue payroll. We have to have accounting programs, and we haven't done anything to really set aside money or come up with a plan with how are these things going to be replaced. Our financial system will be obsolete within 5 years. We will have to buy a new financial system, and that will be upwards of $3 million, give or take. So these are things that we have to look at. And so I think it's important to start getting these in front of your crosshairs so you can kind of see these things that are coming up.
So the items really that we're looking at in an immediate need is under the Public Works Department. Look like that's the items that are really coming up on us quickly. The rest of it, there's more of a runway.
Absolutely.
We're going to be able to say, hey, this in next year's process, we'll be able to say, you know what, these items are priority. We need to move these back, et cetera. So that may be what we're looking at tonight. Is there anything that?
Correct.
Okay.
And again, we think we have some recommendations, but we also look to council for direction and policy, and certain things that we may think are important, the council may say, that's not important to us, this is. And so we respect that, and that's part of this process.
So why don't we let Brian briskly go through his 18 slides and then, oh.
Yeah, he's done. That was a short answer.
I compliment you on this. I think it's comprehensive. I think it hits all the right points. My one piece of consideration is with BBK being new to the table, make sure you engage them because they may see things that we don't see in terms of records retention or, process, just so that we're legally compliant with everything. But I think this is fantastic.
Okay.
And I got all the heavy lifting was Brian, and so I really want to give a little shout out to Brian.
We know that.
Well, I guided him.
Oh. Yeah, right. Yeah.
But all heavy lifting was Brian, by all means, and so kudos to
Great
Brian
job,
for
Brian.
this.
Thank you all.
Well,
Yeah.
this is a high-level compliment, looking at it like this and saying, well done, so thank you. We really appreciate the hard work that's going to just.
Sorry.
Question?
Sorry to be the party killer, but I got to go to page 123.
Okay.
And I got to hear about payment processing and utility billing intelligent voice response system.
They're issuing flip phones to the entire staff. To manage.
There are no flip phones as,
Nice.
let me bounce back to the slide.
This is gonna be one of those things that you get
Oh,
that you
Brian,
need to call and
I'm
says
bummed,
press
man. I thought
one
for
if
sure
you
you'd be
want
using that
this, press
touchscreen
two
right
if
there,
you
bro.
want this.
Wow, even the IT guy can't use it.
There's lots of ways to skip through the slides. I'm keeping it simple. Let me skip through. I do have a slide that addresses, that was it. So the payment processing and utility billing IVR, this would be an actual replacement system to what today we have a couple different systems in place, one of which is a payment processing system, which is how we handle credit card transactions for all of our cashiering stations. It also is a web-based interface in which you can pay your water bill online and you can pay for a class, a recreation class online. All that online payment processing takes place through a special web server that we support and maintain in-house. And it also uses a server that handles that credit card transaction. And then there's another piece where you can call in on your phone, even a flip phone, by the way. And right now, we don't currently have the ability to pay your bill without talking to a human. And so this is actually kind of a combined project where there's a particular vendor that we're aware of, and we believe there's others in the marketplace that handle the online payment processing for you. They handle the credit card transactions, and they also provide an IVR solution where you'd actually be able to sit there on your phone and, press 1 to get your balance and then press 2 to make a payment and enter your credit card number. And so it would offer additional payment options for our citizens, and it would also open up the web to some other payment types as well.
And this is in addition to the main city number. This is another dedicated number for this billing payment process?
My understanding, this would be a number that you would call, and while you waited in the queue to speak to a customer service representative, you would be presented with some options, either to get information or to make a payment.
But now, currently, is there a separate number for utility billing versus the main city number?
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah, the utility billing
So-
counter has their own
So if you called we're not replacing somebody at the main counter of the city that's going to answer the telephone. That's not the gist of this.
No, this is to make the utility billing folks more efficient at responding to customer service requests.
Part of the goal is to eliminate some of the simple questions that they'll get over the phone that can be addressed via automation so that they can focus on the billing and collections portion of the utility billing. So it's not changing, it's not taking away personnel, it's just having them be freed up from some of the lower tasks that this can make as an automated function and free them up to do some more of the higher end tasks that we would like them to do. And it's again, it's a decision because it's all based on service. You know, in terms of if you want to wait in the queue a little bit longer and then get a person to find out what my monthly bill is, that's still what we do today.
Okay. I just don't, to me, it's very valuable to have some person answer that phone at the main city number. To me, that's, whatever that costs us, it's worth it, because that is a great thing. You know, I think it's very valuable, and whatever it costs, it's worth it. So
That was 20
I don't
years
want
ago,
to change that.
We don't do that anymore. We don't talk to people. That's it. Thank you, Brian.
Welcome. Thank you. Oh, wait, I have a recommendation slide. Do we need to work
We're
through
going to do
that?
those at the back end and slam them all out at once. Thank you. One more paper.
Oh. Fit this on here. Okay, I'm going to cover the Centennial General Plan Strategic Implementation Plan. And by the way, I'm Jim Petches, City Planner, for those who don't know me. We talked all along when we were developing the Centennial General Plan and how we were going to make our general plan real, not a sit on the shelf, gather dust type document, but something where we actually monitor our implementation measures and integrate it with our budget process. So this is our first year, our first attempt at accomplishing this goal. And some of the overall goals of doing this is to effectively implement the general plan, ensure that we're well integrated with our CIP and our IT strategic plan that Brian just went over, and also our SIP that I'm presenting tonight. And also to maintain our long-term quality of life goals of the city. And for the general plan to always remain dynamic and up to date and responsive to our community needs. So the process that we did this year to integrate this was, as you recall, earlier the end of last year, we met with the city council. We went through the whole SIP and set priorities of high, medium, and low, and had a long discussion on each one of those, or a lot of those implementation measures. Then the ones that were designated as high priorities were divvied up to the different city departments who were responsible for their individual implementation measures to make recommendations on which ones made sense for us in the next fiscal year to move forward with. The evaluation was done, again, alongside some of our other processes, CIP and ITSP. And then this was integrated into the issue paper that you have before you tonight with the recommendations, as well as a rather lengthy attachment. And that attachment, well, I'll go over that in just a second. So what we're asking the council tonight to do is review and provide basically approval of the SIPs that are recommended by the different departments. If the council approves actions that require funding, then we'll handle that in several different ways. We may prepare a decision package if there's no funding that has already been allocated for that project, or it will be included in the budget for your consideration. And then finally, after the process is all over, as you remember when we went through this several months back, there were a lot of things we were kind of deeming, needs work, or we were calling it the parking lot. Not to bring up parking lots again, but so after the LTFP process is over, we'll come back with an SIP, kind of an annual review, and clean up some of those things that we were discussing several months back. So part of this process is, and part of that attachment is to try and give you a current status of how we're doing in our implementation of the general plan. As you're aware, we have over 300 implementation measures in the general plan. Of those, 169 of those were identified as the higher priority projects. Basically, there's two types that you can kind of categorize these implementation measures in. One is kind of the ongoing day-to-day operations that we just do in the course of business. And the second are project or one-time oriented types of implementation measures. Of the 169 that are high priority, the good news is we're already working on 75% of those. And I think a lot of that has to do with or part of our ongoing operations. But there's also a lot of things going on, as we've discussed in detail tonight. I mentioned the attachment to your staff or your LTFP paper. I'll go over that in just a second. And just want to mention that the fiscal impacts of all the implementation measures that are recommended to go forward will be included as part of our ongoing analysis through the budget process. And this is just an example of the IMs that were basically put in a matrix for you. And based on your recommendations, when we had several months back about this, we categorized them by different departments. So we have one for the city manager's department, community development, public works, and beaches, parks, and recreation. And there's a description of each IM and also a brief status of each one. So if you have any questions about those, we can talk about them individually or have the different department heads talk about them for their departments. The recommendations, I need to go over it in a little bit more detail, than just the overall, approved staff's recommendations, because there's been some changes as we discussed tonight. And then also, there was some discussion about bringing up some topics from last night's city council meeting, so I'll briefly cover that. Beaches, parks, and recreation, we were talking about the master plan, and you've already given us direction on that. That would be deferred for 12 months, and that we would basically, the direction seems to be that we'll finish up and concentrate on the things that are already on the table, such as the Ole Hansen Beach Club and the bathrooms and Courtney Sand Castle and other key projects that Beaches, Parks, and Recreation is fully engrossed in. And then for the city manager's department, we're basically two recommendations. One is to research and look at different options related to the medical services, legislation types of options in terms of that particular issue in the city, which we all know is a really big issue. And then also the information that Brian just covered in the ITSP, such as enhancing e-government, improving business operations. And then for community development, it is basically.
Excuse me, Jim. Can we stop right there for a second? Sure. You brought up the hospital issues, and I'd like to hear about if the city manager's got some ideas about the hospital and talk about some of those plans.
Well, as Jim mentioned, we've been reviewing the legislative process with our local legislators, Bro and Bates, but we're also right now investigating the possibility of maybe setting aside 10 acres of open space out off of La Plata for a hospital use.
Have you, so this will be something out off of the new La Plata extension, or, very interesting idea. Okay, I'll be interested to hear more about that.
We're currently researching it with the city attorney's office right now, and we've been looking into it, but because of the transition to the new city attorney, we're trying to get him up to speed on it now.
Okay, thank you.
And I think it's a real important direction to pursue, because if we, in terms of general plan land use, if we only have one place in town where a hospital can be built and the owner is choosing not to build a hospital, one thing municipal governments can do is identify other zoning opportunities. And so I think that's a great area to look at. With Rancho Mission Viejo coming in, there's probably going to be demand for a facility.
I think they're building 14,000 homes over the hill there, so.
Right.
I think we have a definite opportunity to take advantage of exactly what the city manager said. We should take a hard look at that and see if anybody else, aside from Moral Care, would be interested in looking at a possible facility.
The other thing I would encourage, because that is currently zoned open space, if we get to that point, we can maybe identify other places in town that where we can, if we're using open space for this purpose, where we can purchase or identify, replace the open space that we're losing out there somewhere else in town, so we don't lose precious open space.
Doesn't have to be a vote.
It doesn't, because it's a health, it's a health.
That's what we're reviewing with the city attorney's office right now, is the Measure V says something about the council can make that determination if it's for the public good. And we're trying to verify this meets that criteria.
And frankly, if something like that had to go to a vote, I think the citizens of San Clemente would overwhelmingly approve something like that, frankly. Pardon me?
Would understand the merits, right?
Would certainly understand the
And
merits,
if you
yeah.
recall, just when we brought the general plan cleanups to you a little while back, we were going to create some more open space where there's a commercially zoned area too. So it could be looked at as partly an exchange. Because I think that's over 10 acres in that location.
I was just gonna ask how many acres that was.
And this was an idea that I brought to the city manager, and the reason that I think it's kind of general here is under no circumstances should it subtract from the legislative direction that we're going. And I would hate for it to get out in the community that we're abandoning the legislative path to go this way. This is another quiver in the bow. Quiver in the bow, yeah.
Arrow in the quiver.
Okay, I stand corrected. Arrow in the quiver. I don't know. Another iron in the golf bag.
There you go.
Toolbox in the hammer.
Like, listen to Eric's son take full credit for Brian Brower's.
I just said guy.
Keep talking. No, keep talking,
just
Lori. It
said
was all your idea, 100%. You're right.
Okay.
I'll let the two of you. I'll let the two of you settle that.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along. For the Community Development Department, we already have a lot of things in motion, and that includes the zoning ordinance and specific plan updates. And since I brought it up, the zoning ordinance, the fast tracking portion of it will be going to Planning Commission at our March 18th meeting for a study session initial review. And then we're also working on the LCP, and that'll be going to Planning Commission on April 8th for their initial review.
And sorry, Jim, but can we stop right there and talk about that local coastal plan?
Yeah, I knew that you wanted to talk about that.
I
Sure,
do, yeah. Is this a good time, or you want to?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay.
What was April 8th, really quick? April 8th, the planning
Would be
commission
the first review of the local coastal program.
Okay, thank you.
To me,
Well, wait, because Bob has a
Go ahead.
specific question.
maybe we as a council need to think about and hear from maybe Mr. Vonnegut and whether we should continue down this local coastal plan path. It seems like maybe the costs and benefits don't measure up here. It sounded like a good idea at the time. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's best to let the Coastal Commission weigh in on a lot of these things. I know we've spent a lot of time and effort talking about this thing, but maybe we should evaluate and see whether that really is a good idea for the city to take over what would frankly be a very limited number of coastal approvals. Or maybe it's best to just leave that as it is with the Coastal Commission. How much benefit do we get from having our own process to approve things on the coast?
This is the first time I've heard a concern about this in all the time we've ever talked about it.
Well, you're exactly right, Tim, and that's why some of these things come to you in the middle of the night. You're talking about things that come to you in the middle of the night. I'll take the same argument. It seems like we're we started down this path, and maybe it's time we reflect and think of whether it's a good path to go down or not. Maybe, I don't know.
What's that? Can I respond?
Sure,
a little
please.
bit? Well, if you recall, the principal advantage clearly is for customer service, for our community members not to have to go up to city or up to Long Beach and process a permit, which can take anywhere between 6 months and a year to do, when they get it to the city in probably a matter of a couple of months. So there's a big advantage for the community to do that. But everything like we've been talking tonight, there's always cost benefits on what you do. The other thing is that it gives us local control. It helps us, or gives us the ability to make important decisions on protection of our coastal canyons and our different coastal resources, and because we know best on what, how to treat our particular community and our beaches and our resources. So there's some big advantages in that. And you can go through the entire process to the very end and choose not to do it if you don't like what the rules are that the Coastal Commission ultimately places on you. So we'll go through the process. We'll write it how we want to write our LCP based on our community, goals and what we value the most. And there'll be things that they'll want us to do that maybe we don't like. Well, we don't have to agree to do them. We can submit the coastal plan that we think is best. We'll go to a commission hearing. They'll make comments. They'll make what's called suggested modifications. They can come back to us, and if we don't like it, we can say, well, we don't want to do it.
Jim, what I'm concerned about is how many people does this benefit a year in San Clemente?
Well, I would have to get back to you on research on that.
I mean, is it 1? Is it 20? Is it 50?
It's probably between, as far as applications for houses, it's usually, additions to people's homes and things like that. It's probably 25-ish.
25 a year?
But I'd have to research it. I don't know what that, I'm guessing right now. I'm just
Okay.
anecdotally thinking that's about how many CDPs we process each year for individual homes.
Well, I've been reviewing the Coastal Commission agendas for the last few months, and it seems like there's so few homes in San Clemente that come up that the benefits, I was going to guess 6 a year, and to me, maybe the cost far outweighs the benefit if it's just 6 people a year, but.
Yeah, and there's also, not everything goes to hearing, so there's exemptions that go up to them, and then they decide upon them and they come back. We have a lot of exclusions which we would retain. We would also include a larger expansive permit jurisdiction area, which would even reduce that number more. And we're all about trying to streamline and make things as simple as possible. So you're right about there isn't going to be a huge number of processing. We're talking in the 20s, not the hundreds. So certainly, so there's something to weigh there in terms of the cost benefit. As we move forward, we would be able to get a better handle, and as part of our presentation to the City Council on the adoption of an LCP, we would have a more in-depth analysis of what it meant in terms of staff resources and city cost in order to take it on. Of course, we can always charge permitting fees and things to help recover those costs. But again, there's definitely some cost as well as in relation to the benefits. And in the past, we haven't done this because of some of the issues with how much effort it takes. And I remember last time we processed this, we were this close to getting our LCP certified, and the reason why we didn't do it was there was a big controversy in the city regarding the beach trail. And there was a distrust by a lot of the members of the city that didn't want the city to take on that responsibility because there was a trust gap between the citizens and the community. And in that particular case, it was decided that it wasn't worth the cost of certifying the LCP through the city.
Not that I want to belabor this, but this is, it is interesting. I'd like to know the data behind it. I mean, could we get an analysis done, just a memorandum as to the justification down and upside and cost?
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, it's not happening tomorrow, right? I mean, how far away are we from the LCP?
Well, it's probably at least a year and a half off. We're going to process it in 2 steps. The first one, you'll see the first step, which is the land use plan being processed, in probably the next 3 months to City Council.
Yeah, I'd like some data too, and,
Happy to
okay,
do that.
thank you.
And then just the other thing I wanted to mention in last night's discussion, you were talking about some implementation measures in North Beach. Commissioner Ward brought up the possibility of maybe wanting to move forward one of those. And I wanted to just let you know, and I included it, Lori, now's a good time to pull that up for me. I included in this PowerPoint. It's a policy that's in the general plan under the land use element for North Beach. And it's actually considered a medium priority by the city council right now, so it wasn't in your packet. But I just wanted to draw your attention to it. That's not the right one.
We're not there yet.
Anyway, it says consider the possibility of implementing a master plan for the North Beach area. So wanted to bring that up.
Okay. Sorry.
It's a separate slide. There it is. Right
There it is. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
So it's LU 14, prepare a specific plan, zoning overlay, or other similar mechanism for North Beach to reflect changes in a North Beach, North El Camino Real area, focus area.
Can you talk about what plans we already have there, like for streets and, I mean,
Well,
what's already been worked on?
There's been a lot of studies down there already. There's originally a firm named MIG did a visioning for the city, which included North Beach. There's the focus area within the general plan, so there's special policies within the general plan itself that gives vision for the North Beach area. There's a beach parking master plan for North Beach, and there's a traffic master plan for North Beach.
And the traffic master plan covers the streets and signals and circulation and all that?
It was something that the council directed us to do. They considered the development of Marblehead and also the development in San Juan Capistrano of Rancho San Clemente, or I'm sorry, Rancho Mission Viejo developments. So it includes those potential growth impacts and analysis. At the time we were processing the lab, so it included an analysis with the lab and without the lab occurring, including considerations for the build out of the Miramar Theater and some of the other vacant lots in the area.
Were you going to talk about where the sidewalks are prioritized in capital improvement projects in here? Were you prepared to do that at all with this?
Just the recommendations that we have in there.
We're not prepared to talk about the sidewalks. We did talk about that internally today, the sidewalk that was mentioned in April of 14, and we're going to be following up with council on that.
Okay, I just meant in general what we had planned. The sidewalks are part of we have a sidewalk program that every year, we prioritize which areas we're going to work on that, right? Okay, thank you. I couldn't remember which fund.
Actually, what we prioritize are repairs. The money that we've been budgeting, except for a little bit of CDBG money, is all for repairs that we've been trying to catch up over the last several years with. So we don't really have funds budgeted to do sidewalk programs unless there's some special funding, like we got $1 million budget or appropriated by the city council a few years ago that we went out and expanded our sidewalk system then. But since then, CDBG is basically the funding source we've used for new sidewalks.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing over it. There's $800,000 out there that we're spending on something else we could use at North Beach. But I said that last night. That's all right.
Okay, just to kind of wrap up, then the Public Works recommendations for this fiscal year is sidewalk maintenance, tree ordinance, utilities undergrounding plan, a study of generators for critical city facilities, the feasibility and needs for that, improved efficiencies for a variety of things such as a water survey.
I'm sorry, Jim, but I got to hear about generators for public safety. I got to hear a little bit about that. What's that?
This item is came out of the general plan, and so it's on our work plan to basically assess where we may need, and if we're going to come up with recommendations to have emergency backup generators at any other city facilities in addition to where we have them now, which is City Hall, and I believe we have one down at the Corp Yard. So it's just an assessment, working with Katie, our emergency planning officer, on do we think we need any, are there any other city facilities we would deem critical where we would make recommendations to install emergency backup power? And that's just to respond to an action item that came out of the general plan, to go through that assessment, then make a recommendation to your council to see if we should actually implement that. So that's what that is.
Nothing we're talking about tonight is a final decision, is that right? We're going to get details on almost everything we're recommending here?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
And this is just a proposal.
Let's move it forward.
Right. Yes.
But Tim, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, right there. That's exactly what I was trying to get to.
That basically wraps it up. Is there any further questions?
Wait, I have a question, really quick. Jim, help me out with where North Beach on the priority list is a, did you say it was a medium priority?
That's why.
That's not on here, right?
What you received are just the high priorities. So
Okay.
it didn't make that particular list. But again, I'd also want to reiterate that every year we're going to be coming back and relooking at these priorities with the city council, updating them. We can add implementation measures to this list because these are not actually in the general plan. They live outside it, so that they're more responsive to our community needs and allows us to be flexible to figure out newer or better ways to implement the goals of the general plan.
I'm just trying to figure out a way. You know, when I brought up the triangle last night and us looking at it, staff reminded me that there is a lot of studies already done on North Beach, and really to implement looking at North Beach as a whole wouldn't require this gigantic implementation plan that there's been some offers of, someone told me about, and Jim, you're gonna have to help me, a design institute that comes and looks for free at an area if you tell them that this is a goal, and I don't know the name of it.
The acronym is RUDAT. We've done that before in the city a long time ago.
Okay, and that maybe they could come in, it was actually Taylor Morrison Homes that actually told me about this design, that if we wanted, if the city council said we want to look at this triangle lot as a recreational opportunity or community placemaking by the ocean, that they would come in and do that. And also, Jim mentioned to me that our college staff that comes in, that for maybe $20,000, we could get them to look at the North Beach area and see what we might be easily implementing in that area. Because I want to remind you that anything that we do in that area is going to economically help the development of, I think, North El Camino Real. That people aren't doing things with those lots, and maybe if North Beach had more interest, maybe lots like the car wash or the U-Haul might be more valuable to the owner to make it something else. So I don't know where it fits all in here, but I would like to see if maybe, I mean, in Beaches, Parks, and Recreation, it says implementation measure 50, pursue grants and other funding opportunities for beaches, trails, parks, and other recreational facilities in San Clemente. So I don't know if this really should be a Beaches, Parks, and Rec thing, but maybe we could look into something that maybe we could look at North Beach a little bit to see what we could be doing in there and not wait another year before we do that. I'm just asking for some.
Who's the staff
guidance on
liaison
this.
with the North Beach Community Association? Amber?
Amber.
Amber?
Oh, yeah.
Because I got the impression when Tyler Johnson was speaking last night that they have a list of priorities in terms of ideas as well. So have you been going to their meetings?
I have. They do have ideas, except they did not know about the triangle lot. So they're working in, you know, not knowing totally what's available to that area.
Meaning that it was an undeveloped opportunity area.
They don't even know about it. So I'm trying to say that maybe we should be focusing on what we could be doing there on that. It doesn't take anything away from the lot of, the parking lot that council approved last
I just think the challenge is at North Beach, there's so many needs. The Triangle is probably dropped down after sidewalks, proper street management, circulation problems, parking concerns. I mean, there's a big litany of things that are wrong there, and the Triangle isn't.
Well, I don't know. I've been told by staff that as far as our streets and everything, there's a study that says we can handle everything that's there, right? That we can handle, we've looked at Rancho Mission Viejo, and our streets are good.
Well, we have more than adequate capacity in our streets, but the issues with the neighborhoods, I believe, have to do with safety, traffic calming, and things like that. We have the capabilities of providing enough circulation there, but there's questions about how that should be handled. And we're not just talking about one block here, we're talking about a whole area, I think. So it would be a fairly significant effort because we'd be looking at sidewalks, the streets, the traffic flows, working with the neighborhood. So it's a pretty good-sized exercise.
And the North Beach Community Association is primarily business owners along that area. And there's a whole half of that is the residents, which have to, they're there 24 hours a day, not 12. And so you're dealing with that side street where any spillover on traffic and parking problems is on the residents' backs, not on the business owners.
Okay, so you're saying you don't want to look at North Beach as
No,
planning it for the entire community?
I don't
not
want to
just North
prioritize the
Beach?
Triangle over all the streets and sidewalks. That would be my comment, that there's.
So not to even study it?
No,
We're not
I don't-
prioritizing it?
No, I'm not.
I think that Kathy,
It's not necessarily prioritizing it, but it's a little bit like the Triangle isn't the only, it's not the panacea. It's not the one thing that's going to fix the area. You don't fix the Triangle in North Beach, it's going to be wonderful. There's a whole series of things that have been constant nagging problems that would be, in my mind, a higher priority if you want to improve North Beach. That would be a little farther down on the list. Not that it's not important, but there are other priorities which, to residents, would be, yeah, why don't you make it streets safer for my kids to walk down? I'm glad the Triangle is nice, but ultimately, if I can't walk down the street with a degree of comfort, what is the Triangle going to do for me? You know, that's what I'm saying.
See, I disagree on the economic vitality that the Triangle will provide. I don't know that the Miramar is going to be the only nexus and will actually uplift North Beach. I think having a center to North Beach is going to do that and uplift the whole area. It will. I think it's going to help.
I think what you're trying to do, Kathy, and I admire it because I think that's what I want to do is focus more on North Beach. I don't think tonight is the right time to do it. So I think we can move forward. I'm just mentioning it because you told me last night to bring it up tonight. That's right. I
So
do recall that.
that's why I'm doing it. I'm the new person here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have 2 years on like you do.
That was good.
Okay?
Good zing there.
So
Jeez.
I'm just trying to bring it up because I don't know when to bring it up, but
Yeah.
it seems like we're trying to prioritize here. I'm just trying to get you, council, to maybe look at that.
Yeah.
So here's a possible idea. How about, and if this is out of line, say it's out of line, how about if you meet with Amber and then maybe the chair of the Planning Commission and the chair of Beaches, Parks, and Recreation, and the four of you, and maybe there's somebody else that should be in that meeting as well, but talk through what you want, because I share what the mayor shares. It's time, it's North Beach's time. And so talk to them, explain what.
And I would offer up, Kathy, I think you and I should sit down and have a discussion, and we can bring Tom Frank, which I don't think he's here this evening, who has a lot of great ideas.
Tom should be at the table too.
And we can sit down and vet out some ideas that are already on the table, that have already been discussed, that have been looked into to a certain degree, and we can go forward from there with projects. I think North Beach has a lot of things going for it that's going to change the entire face of that in the next 3 years. And so for us to plan now before we know what those impacts are going to be, I think is planning too early. So I think we have projects that are already in place that are going to make it better than it is now. And you and I can sit down and discuss some other options.
But bring in those other people, Amber and everything, because I think if I learned anything from the Little American Business experience, we started with a plan and drilled down, and I think in North Beach it's going to be more grassroots and it's going to be more projects and it's going to be more tactical than.
But I'm with Tim 100%. Sidewalks is the number one priority.
Well, the trick is with Amber is she's primarily a liaison with the business groups there.
Yeah, not the residents.
Not necessarily the residents, which are going to be equally important. And so it really, You're gonna have to.
Actually, in that association, there are some residents.
There's a
I'm
couple.
in it, and I'm not a resident of North Beach. I'm just a resident.
I'm just curious where their needs and interests are placed in the hierarchy. You know, if they're addressing it mainly on the business interests or whatever, because frankly, that area is one of the areas most where businesses and residents seem to be, you know, just like in the Del Marte zone. It's just they're you can't separate them. They're one, you know, integrated unit. And so the problem is I've heard about all these projects over time, different ideas that have come up that all seem like they're kind of going forward. It would be nice to get a review and see what those look like.
The traffic roundabout being upgraded.
Let's. I think you and I need to sit down and talk, and I can share with you where I'm at, and then you can share new ideas, and then we can get some agendized and actually make some stuff happen, build a house, sort of say.
So we'll go ahead and kind of close it out.
I had one other item, which I alluded to earlier, but I just want to make explicit. The TOT, we talked about this tourist occupancy tax. I'd like to see us optimize that, and I don't know. It was the mayor's idea, and I'm just his mouthpiece.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks, Laura.
Actually, it was my idea.
Made it all better. Made it all better.
Before that, it was Bob and then Kathy.
Anyway, so here's what I'm interested in. I think it's an untapped revenue source. I think that enforcement is probably 90% of it being effective. And so what I'm looking for is some sort of staff point of view on what the upside in terms of revenue potential is, and if it's something that perhaps could be outsourced and managed, you know, by a third party, so that, you know, with some sort of commission system, whereas if they capture the taxes, they get 2% or whatever it is. But I'd like to look at that as an untapped.
Absolutely, and one of the things that we currently have.
With the mayor.
Something I want to augment. What were you going to say?
We currently have budgeted a TOT audit in this budget year. So what that means, and we haven't done it before, but I've done it at other agencies, we actually have a consultant come in who goes to the hotels that we tell him or her to go to, and they require the hotel to pull their records, and they go through the audit to make sure that they've reported in compliance for X amount of years, and there's penalties associated if they've underreported and potential revenue that they can capture. So that will be going on this budget year, but all your other points, there are other agencies that we can, or other firms that we can look at for that potential revenue sharing.
I want to add something to what Lori had on my fantastic idea, and that is look at the potential of expanding it more than 30 days, so upwards of 60 days, and if there's a possibility to have special TOT districts that say, I'm just pulling this from the top of my head, that only exist in residential low-density areas, that'd be fantastic. So if we can look at really specialized TOT areas in districts, I think just as a whole would be fantastic.
And also cyber rentals is going to be a huge piece of it.
Correct, and we currently have a consultant that we hired, I communicated earlier, that does the ghost reviews. Okay.
So, because I think that might be a good revenue.
And that segues perfectly into something I wanted to add in terms of fees. So I know that staff's already looking at updating our fire and EMS related fees. Eric?
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that that's going to come.
Correct, and I was going to close with, on page 30 of the LTFP, I bulleted 4 different points that we're going to be focusing on that deal with controlling our general fund operating position, exploring options for leasing / selling city properties, revisiting recreation partnerships, subsidy agreements, that'll be coming back to you very soon, as well as pursuing options for additional fee revenue where appropriate. And then also something that'll be coming back to you is reviewing the structure of the city's parking lot lease agreements.
Okay.
So your point is taken with regards to fire and EMS review of fees?
And one of the things I'd like us to look at too coming up this year is a potential for a golf cart registration program and see if that's something that we can delve into further.
We can.
No, separate from the golf course. Separate golf cart registration fee. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that for me. So
we can look at that.
Yeah.
Don't jeopardize Bob's cards.
No, yeah, I'm
Touch the card.
separate from that.
So Tim's will now have a fee
Yes.
attached to it.
Yes.
So what we're going to do for the sake of time and quickness is Joanne's going to lead us through the recommendations in kind of an abbreviated format, so I'll let Joanne take it from there.
Okay, what you could do is just do one motion for each group and only specify the exceptions to it. For example, if you approve staff's recommendation for capital projects, you could just do that with the exception of the 2.5 for City Hall improvements and postponement of 12 months for the Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Master Plan.
We don't need to read them all, right?
You do not, just
Okay.
one motion for each group, and you could just say staff recommendation for reserve analysis, and just tell me any exceptions.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I move that we adopt staff recommendations for financial trend analysis, financial forecast, reserve analysis, and fiscal policy without any changes.
Second.
Without the fiscal policy, you said?
I just went up all the way to fiscal policy. Capital projects is next.
That's a motion by Brown, second by Doncheck. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move that we adopt staff recommendation for capital projects analysis, the exception being on item 4, city facilities rehabilitation, that we to hold back the $2.5 million schedule for the City Hall project, and further contemplate that action item before we move forward, and that we would postpone the Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Master Plan for a 12-month period of time until fiscal year 2016.
Second. Motion by Brown, second by Hamel. All in favor?
Aye. I move that we adopt the Information Technology Strategic Plan as recommended. And did we have any changes for the Centennial General Plan?
No.
And that we also adopt,
I'm sorry, make 2 notes to that. On the number 1, we were going to
Is
make
Beaches,
sure that
Parks, and Rec.
we'll delay the Beaches Park Recreation Master Plan by 12 months.
okay.
But
Did he
that's
say
in a
that? I'm
different
sorry.
section,
But that was on
though,
the different section.
Double dipping.
And,
But it's also on,
And number 3, the community development implementation measure per Baker to come back with an LCP analysis.
Great.
okay, then I move that we adopt.
Before we do that, do we want to add in the memo for the moving of City Hall, since we kind of bypassed that? That staff's going to come back with?
Well, that we already held that back. That
Okay.
was-
Okay, great.
Okay, so first of all, let's move Information Technology Strategic Plan.
second.
Perfect. Motion by Brown, second by Ward. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Passes
and
5-0.
I move that we adopt staff recommendation for Centennial General Plan Strategic Implementation Priorities, except, with the exception of number 1, that we will push back the Beaches, Parks, and Recreation Department Master Plan 12 months. And then on item 3, that we come back with a further in-depth analysis of the LCP and look at the cost versus benefit of that implementation and and further vet that out before we move forward.
Second. Motion by Brown, second by Hamel. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 5-0.
Oral communications.
Okay.
Don't
any
have
cards?
cards.
No cards? Do you have to open and close the public hearing? Or the? No?
Just
Just adjourn?
And
Okay.
before we
Okay.
adjourn, I want to thank staff. I think this was very well done. And
No.
it's really clear you all worked together and it all holds together, and I think you served our city really well. So
Yes, thank you for everybody who participated and spent 3 hours on a Wednesday night, 2 nights in a row. It was much appreciated. Oh, 4 hours, as the city manager pointed out.
All right, did you have
Thank
another
you.
anniversary you skipped tonight?
We do appreciate it.
Tonight it was his son's birthday.
And in honor of you guys, we're going to cut Tim's stipend this month to give everybody a bonus. So that's 1
Amen.
cent apiece, everybody.
Let's do it.
Actually, 2 cents. We
I
have
don't
2
need
employees.
any more food to eat, I can
Yeah.
tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Double whammy.
With
So-
that, I move that we adjourn. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, I move that we adjourn to the next regular council meeting to be held on March 17, 2015, in the council chambers located 100 Avenue, Presidio, Sacramento, California. Closed session items will be considered at 5 p.m. The general session will commence at 6 p.m.
Motion by Brown, second by Doncheck. All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0.